Chapter 4368. The Peony Fairy and the Ginkgo Fairy, who were sitting not far behind this pair of adult and child, were leisurely snacking on melon seeds and drinking tea. When they heard their bizarre conversation, the corners of their mouths twitched uncontrollably. "You're so talkative, and my sister doesn't like to talk normally. How exactly do you two communicate?" The little monk, Kong Kong, lifted his large, watery eyes and brushed Xiao Lin an irritated glance. "What do you know?" Every time Kong Kong speaks, Benefactress listens attentively. "Sut." The little monk sighed in melancholy. He raised his small, shiny, bald head and gazed at the peach tree at a 45-degree angle. A large, bright red peach leaped into the little fellow's eyes, causing him to involuntarily click his tongue. This peach is so eye-catching on top of this little monk's head. Is it because this little monk wants to eat it? The little monk extended two chubby fingers and gestured at the starting distance. Unfortunately, Benefactress doesn't like to talk too much. She only opens her mouth when she's insulting someone. The little monk shook his head, and a fire spirit abruptly sprayed out from his chubby little hand. The large peach on top of his head was struck by the fire spirit and fell down. The little monk hugged his peach fully and contentedly, turning a deaf ear to the Benefactress's sister's guffaws. "Sister." Shaolin jumped up. The little monk hastily looked up and saw the little stoic girl patter over from afar. Kong Kong's large eyes instantly turned round, and he subconsciously put the peach back into his inner world. Then he broke into a run and ran toward the little stoic. "Benefactress." The little fellow pounced and latched onto her body. Benefactress, you're finally back." The stoic expressionlessly pulled him off her body and lifted him up, exchanging glances with him. "You got fat again." The little stoic pointed out mercilessly. The little monk blinked. The lollipop in his mouth was still there, but his pair of large, adorable eyes were tinged with astonishment. "Benefactress, you're insulting me as soon as you open your mouth? Are you still my gentle and amiable benefactress?" "You're not. Go." "Ta." Shaolin squatted on the ground and couldn't help but slap her thigh as she guffawed. Looking at this little fat monk who was constantly thinking about his benefactress, in the end, when they met, he could only be mercilessly scolded. The small monk turned his head and glared at Jolin with an accusing gaze. Jolin hurriedly held back her laughter and waved her small hands. Sorry, I couldn't help it." Arbor looked at his sister, his gaze softening. "How is it?" Shaolin jumped up and spun a few rounds in front of her sister. "Sister, look." Arbor looked at her for a while and nodded. "Very good." Di Ling had broken through to the spirit realm and was now a second-rank spirit master. Our dear Shaolin, who controlled the 9th layer spiritual water and innate water, summoned a ball of water mist with a wave of her small hand. She stood there charmingly and smiled at Xiaomu the entire way. Arbor looked at her for a while, then took out a few bottles of pills from his inner world and handed them to his sister. "You don't have to be in a hurry to advance, just stabilize your cultivation. These pills can help you stabilize your current realm, so don't be too anxious to advance." Jolin nodded repeatedly and took the pill bottles, storing them in her inner world. "Sister, I'll listen to you." Arbor was very satisfied and patted his sister's small head. Chapter 4369. "Elder sister, why did you come in at this time?" Jolin asked with a smile. Arbor nodded. "Just now, I sensed a very strong fluctuation of divine power. Duanmu should be coming out of seclusion." As he spoke, everyone heard a long howl from afar. Arbor's eyes narrowed and he ordered Qiu, "Let him out quickly." Once Duanmu Qing left the outside world, he would have to undergo the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation. Facts had proven that the heavenly Tao, this old thing, was indeed a judge of character. When Duanmu Qing was in the 5 spirit reincarnation cycle, there weren't so many problems. It was unlike the time when the heavenly Tao restricted how phase advancement and forcefully created the great tribulation of lightning and fire. This time, Duanmu Qing had successfully completed the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation in less than an hour. After going through the 5 levels of wood, lightning, water, fire, and earth, Duanmu Qing successfully completed his advancement and became a grade 2 god-tier master. Arbor, Mo Lien, Hu Shichen, and the rest of the onlookers watched Duanmu Qing from the front of the court until he completed his advancement. With such a big commotion, Long Ji and Long Xiangyun were urgently called over. When they saw Duanmu Qing's current state, the two of them couldn't help but curse in their hearts what was going on. He was simply sick in the head. No wonder the seawater was churning and the entire underwater city was shaking. It turned out that someone was undergoing the five spirits' reincarnation tribulation in their underwater spiritual realm. Arbor turned and saw the siblings' ugly expressions. He shook his head and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, but Duanmuqing can't do anything about it." After all, as soon as he came out of the star domain, he was immediately targeted by the Heavenly Tao's lightning tribulation. The Heavenly Tao unleashed its might. The power of the five spirits passed through the seawater and rushed towards Duanmuqing. They could not stop it, could they? I thought something had happened. Long Huan looked at her speechlessly and said, "Our dwelling place can't withstand the power of the five spirits of the Heavenly Tao." At this time, Duanmuqing had already completed his advancement. He slowly walked in front of Arbor with a faint smile in his eyes. He was already completely fine. The corpse poison that had previously been flowing through his body had now been completely removed. He had actually profited from the disaster and successfully advanced to the deity realm. In terms of cultivation, he had advanced by leaps and bounds. Arbor glanced at him. Thinking of how this guy had cut off his own wrist, he felt a little angry for no reason. Humph. They all lowered their heads to look at her. The little stoic's face was cold and expressionless as she turned around to leave. Duanmuqing could not help but smile bitterly. Jojo is still angry. It's obvious. Emolian glanced at him and was about to say something when a muffled dong sound came from afar. Then a howl was heard. Everyone was shocked, and they hastily chased after Chiao Mu. From afar, he saw the little girl expressionlessly holding a vine whip and fighting with a person in front of her. Her silhouette was extremely fast, and the speed of her attacks was so fast that it made people feel a little dazzled. 1 second she was still in front of that person. The next second she had already teleported behind that person. The moment she appeared, she slashed towards that person's neck. Long Ji and Long Xiangyun's hearts jumped violently. The little girl's savagery was probably one of a kind. She simply could not be bothered to waste words with whoever attacked her. She also did not ask for the reason and directly counterattacked. Fuck. Quickly stop. Long Xiangyun couldn't help but exclaim when she saw this person's face clearly. Chapter 4370. Eldest brother, it's Achun. He's Madame Bai's. Long Xiangyun hastily tugged at Long Qian's sleeve. Long Qian's face alternated between green and white. He laughed bitterly in his heart, wishing for nothing more than to flick his sleeves and leave immediately. What the heck was going on? This second aunt, could it be that she couldn't use her brain before doing something? He didn't believe that grandmother ordered this. It must be Bai Ningxuang herself who came to stir up trouble for the sake of avenging her son, Long Ji. In this way his little stoic cousin would definitely loathe their Long family even more. This was simply adding fuel to the fire. Achun's movements were very nimble. He roared and retreated a step, barely avoiding the little stoic's startling swan blade. "You're courting death." An apathetic expression hung on the stoic face. With a slight flick of her wrist, several cold glints flew toward Achun's face. "Hurry and dodge." Long Xiangyun shouted angrily. The Long family disciples who were originally going to help hastily retreated. In the blink of an eye, a series of explosions came from the unlucky Achun's body. Bang 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 bang. Bang 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 bang. His entire body was immediately covered in blood, and his body was blasted to pieces. Long Qian's heart chilled. He inwardly thought that these concealed weapons were very powerful. Even Achun, a level 10 spirit realm cultivator, didn't have the slightest ability to ward them off. Could be imagined how terrifying these things were. "Cousin, please." Before Long Qian could finish speaking, he saw the little stoic fly up and use startling swan blade. A cold glint sharply slid past Achun's neck. A faint line of blood drew open on that person's neck, and in a flash, a whole head fell to the ground. This back and forth was merely a matter of minutes. Long Xiangyun shuddered all over and looked up at the little stoic. She was untainted by a speck of dust. Her plain clothes were as white as snow, and her bright eyes shone brightly. Her pitch-black pupils seemed to be leaping with sparks, so scorching that it was almost impossible to look straight at them. "The Long family is very good." Arbor threw down this sentence coldly and walked toward the entrance. "Since you want to start a war, then let's fight." No. That's not it." Long Xiangyun muttered to herself. Long Shi hurriedly chased after her and cried out, "Cousin, it's a misunderstanding, it's really a misunderstanding. Madame Bai acted on her own accord, it was not my grandmother's idea." "Is there a difference?" Arbor suddenly turned his head and looked at him coldly. Long Huan choked for a moment. He suddenly felt that there was no difference whether it was Madame Bai's men or his grandmother's orders. After all, his aunt was a member of the Dragon Clan. Everything she did represented the Dragon Clan. Long Yun took a deep breath. I'm sorry, cousin. Don't get angry first. I will immediately report this matter to the Patriarch and let her deal with it, okay? Cripple her, Arbor said coldly. Just now, that servant called Ah-chun snatched her eyes without a second word. If it weren't for that, how could she have retaliated so ruthlessly? Emolien quickly walked up and pulled Arbor to examine her from head to toe with a frown. She turned to look at Long Qian and said coldly, Bai Ning Shuang must die. If she doesn't die, then all of you can die. The man's voice was as cold as ice without any room for negotiation. He raised his hand and countless black figures appeared from all directions. They raised their arms and shouted, Die, die, die. Chapter 4371. Long Huan's expression naturally appeared extremely unsightly. Normally, they didn't see many people appear beside the Crown Prince. Most of the Dragon Clan's attention was placed on those 100 Phoenix clansmen with high cultivation, who knew that no less than 1,000 people would pounce out when the Crown Prince casually waved his hand. Looking closely at his finger, these black-clothed attendants were released from a space ring. They heard that His Highness the Crown Prince was a rare divine artifact master, and that ring should be a space artifact that could store life. Long Shangyun wanted to go up and say something, but her elder brother pulled her back and stopped her steps. Long Huan's complicated gaze landed on Arbor and he sighed deeply. Madam Bai Shi, Long Huan, Emolien coldly interrupted him. Ever since you stepped into the river of forgetfulness, think carefully. How many people have tried to cause trouble for Jojo, and how many people have ulterior motives? Even if you want to be a peacemaker, you have to see if the conditions allow it. Long Huan felt a chill run down his spine when he was stared at by the Crown Prince's bone-chilling phoenix eyes. Who is Bai Ning Shuang to dare come here and stir up trouble? Emolien coldly said, Go. Since the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness can't bear to lay a hand on this woman, go and bring her here. Yes. The Purple Forest Guard leader cupped his fists after receiving the order and immediately left with a group of black-clothed youths. Long Shangyun's expression shifted, and she hastily went up to stop them. Crown Prince, this is the river of forgetfulness. Don't, long-winded. Prince Emo interrupted Long Shangyun's incessant chatter. His phoenix eyes were abnormally chilly, like the clear splendor of a cold moon. What's going on? I just went over to take care of some trivial matters. Long Huan, why are you arguing with Jojo again? A giggling voice came from afar. Everyone turned to look and saw young Master Ding, who was dressed in a purple robe, walking along the flowery path. With a gentle breeze, fragmented osmanthus flowers fell one after another, sprinkling on his hair, body and feet, covering the ground in a faint golden hue. So ugly, the little stoic expressionlessly said. Everyone, can you be any more dishonest than you already are? Regardless of whether this young man in purple is standing in the crowd or in the bustling world, he is not inferior to your husband and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, right? Flirting. Don't know what you're talking about, Arbor said coldly. Ushirchen was speechless. Coquettish and pretentious. Emolien, naturally seductive and pretentious. Cough cough cough. Mu Xingchen and Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but cough. Long Shangyun speechlessly turned to a certain facial paralysis whose words kept popping out. Truthfully speaking, she couldn't bear the sight of Ding Yun's actions as well. But at the very least, she wasn't blind, so it was naturally impossible for her to connect Ding Yun with the words ugly as hell, and the pile of criticism that followed. Just how much did Sir Jojo dislike the person in front of him? Long Huan silently glanced at the little girl and then looked at Ding Yun with sympathy. He suddenly felt that compared to this young and handsome young master that Sir Jojo disliked so much, at least he wasn't as loathsome. Ding Yun walked over and stopped in front of Arbor and the others. He asked with a smile, Jojo, is Long Huan looking for trouble with you? Long Huan couldn't help but roll his eyes. Didn't he receive enough lessons on this journey? Did he have nothing better to do than to find trouble with the little stoic? Chapter 4372. Xiao Mu's small face was stoic as she coldly gazed at him without uttering a word for a long time. What's your relationship with the Long family? Why didn't they kill you when you barged into the Dragon Clan's sacred grounds? Emolien suddenly asked. When Ding Yun heard this, he casually glanced at the man and snorted. Take a guess. Long Huan's explanation was that the state advisor had barged into the Dragon Clan's sacred grounds and had been detained. This should be true. But now, Ding Yun was able to walk out of the dungeon without permission. Therefore there must be something that they didn't know about. Long Huan looked at Ding Yun with a complicated gaze and sighed. He turned to Emolian and said, Crown Prince, you may not know, but this young Master Ding is actually— Why are you capturing me? Let me go. Let me go. How dare you be so impudent in the land of the Wangchuan tribe? A sharp female voice suddenly interrupted Long Huan, causing him to frown. This voice was so sharp that it almost pierced everyone's eardrums. It was extremely uncomfortable to listen to. The Purple Forest Guards brought forward a woman who was struggling with all her might and screaming in anger. Bai Ning Shuang's hairpins were disheveled, her makeup was dull, and her crimson robes were wrinkled. She was in a sorry state. Behave yourself. One of the Purple Forest Guards gave her a heavy slap on the back of her shoulder, causing Bai Ning Shuang to squeal. Noisy. Arbor frowned in displeasure. Crown Prince Emo glanced at him coldly, and the Purple Forest Guard punched Bai Ning Shuang's back forcefully. Madame Bai cried out in shock. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. She was in so much pain that she couldn't speak. Bai Ning Shuang struggled to get up, but someone stepped on her back and pinned her down. She angrily raised her head and stared coldly at Emolian and the others. She said angrily, You dare. Emolian's gaze shifted as he coldly observed from the sidelines without saying anything. The Purple Forest Guard had a good understanding of his master's personality. Even the slightest of glances would be immediately understood. Without another word, the long sword in his hand slashed towards Bai Ning Shuang's neck. Clang. A curved blade spirit artifact that was spinning through the air abruptly collided with the Purple Forest Guard's long sword, instantly parrying his sword strike. Arbor turned to look. Long Qian came with a group of a few hundred mermaids with a cold expression. Arbor subconsciously raised his hand and touched the little white snake coiled around his wrist. A pair of cold and emotionless eyes stared coldly at Long Qian, and there wasn't the slightest trace of warmth in them. Everyone listen to my order. The little stoic ordered icily. Here. Those who stop me will be killed without mercy. Yes. Long Qian's eyes narrowed slightly. Arbor raised her hand and summoned the thunderclap sword. The spinning barb gently slid through the air. A sharp light flashed past Bai Ning Shuang's eyes. After a blood-curdling scream, Bai Ning Shuang reached out with a trembling hand and held her bloodshot eyes. She screamed in terror and panic. A trace of disbelief flitted across Long Qian's solemn face. She couldn't help but size up the little girl in white clothes who was as cold as ice. In her body he could really see a trace of his daughter Long Chuyun back then. However, it was just a trace. The little girl wasn't Long Chuyun. She didn't have Long Chuyun's good temper. Chapter 4373. Unlike Long Chuyun's patience, this little girl was very calculative. Whenever someone offended her, she would take revenge on the spot. It seemed impossible for her to hold her breath and endure it in secret. Long Qian took a deep breath and looked down at Bai Ning Shuang, who was kneeling by Arbor's feet with her hair in a mess. Now that you've punished her, can you hand her over to me? Emolian couldn't help but sneer. Do you think it's that easy? The long sword in the Purple Forest Guard's hand pressed down on Bai Ning Shuang's shoulder, causing her to bend over. Long Qian said coldly, Bai Ning Shuang was the one who made the first move. She didn't think it through and did something wrong. However, the two of you have already punished her. She lost her eyes, so let's end this here. Humph. Emolian stared at Long Qian coldly. Who do you think you are? What kind of tone and attitude are you using to talk to me? You don't have the right to decide how to end this. I have the right to decide. Long Qian's breath was stuck in her chest and she didn't know what to say. Long Qian quickly stepped forward and said in a low voice, Forget Chuan invited the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess here to form the Celestial Fate Legion. At this moment, we should be united against the enemy instead of fighting among ourselves. Arbor kicked Bai Ning Shuang, who was in a pitiful state, to Long Qian's feet. He turned around and said coldly, I'm tired. Lisha Island is ready. You can go there at any time. Long Qian let out a sigh of relief. Bai Ning Shuang stood up while trembling. Suddenly, she stood up and grabbed the green scepter in the old madam's hand. Long Qian's eyes turned cold. Just as she was about to scold her, Bai Ning Shuang turned around with the scepter in her hand and slapped the fist-sized black pearl on top of the scepter. Long Qian's eyes changed. She couldn't help but yell, Bai Ning Shuang, you? An ink-colored halo of light instantly emerged from the scepter. Then the brilliant light shone brightly and covered everyone on the scene. Everyone was bewildered as they looked up at the inky brilliance that had enveloped the entire realm. The Mare people, the Purple Forest Guards, the Phoenix Clan members, and even Emo Lien, Mu Xingchen, and the others in Arbor were all enveloped in the dim light of the night. They looked around in confusion. They thought that the ink light would attack them indiscriminately. However, in reality no one felt any discomfort in their bodies. They felt as if this domain was natural and it was just blocking this space. What's going on? Feng Zhangfei looked around blankly. Why are you protecting us? Do you want to fight? Feng Zhangqing raised his hand to stop the group of Feng brothers who were ready to make a move. He looked at Emolian with a puzzled gaze. While holding Qiao Mu's small hand, Emolian was in the midst of vigilantly inspecting their surroundings when he suddenly felt the little fellow's small hand tighten around his. He looked down and saw that his Jojo's face was slightly pale. Large beads of sweat rolled down from her temples. Her slender body was swaying as if she couldn't even stand properly. Jojo. Everyone saw that she was different from usual and quickly gathered around her. Arbor felt that the Divine Ruins realm was abnormal, and he couldn't suppress it. His body swayed a few times. Emolian reached out to hold him and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 4374. Jojo. Emolian was greatly alarmed, and her expression changed drastically. Jojo. Wu Shichen, Mu Xingchen and the others' expressions also changed. What was going on? Everyone was normal, but Jojo was the only one who became like this? So Bai Ningxuang's actions just now were targeted at Jojo. She touched the black pearl on the old madame's scepter. Everyone supported Jojo in a flurry, and their gazes all turned to Long Qian. They discovered that Long Qian's face was also deathly pale. She cut her fingertip and dripped a thick drop of blood onto the black pearl, as if she was trying her best to suppress something. However, she couldn't suppress it at all. Long Qian's fingers were bleeding, and she tightly pressed down on the black pearl on the scepter. Her body trembled along with the trembling black pearl. Grandmother! Long Shangyun and Long Qian shouted at the same time. With a wave of their hands, they led countless mermen forward and used their spiritual energy to assist the old madam in suppressing the restless black pearl. Arbor spat out blood again and her body involuntarily slid to the ground. Prince Mo panicked and reached out to grab her waist, hugging her as she slid down. He propped himself up on one knee and said in a trembling voice, Jojo, Jojo. Arbor felt the ruins of God ripple heavily, and even her conscience began to tremble in pain. She lowered her head with difficulty, and a flickering light secretly flowed in the depths of the little stoic's scarlet eyes. Younger sister, Mu Xingchen shouted in panic. Everyone followed the little stoic's gaze and simultaneously looked down, only to see a white luster flickering at her lower abdomen. The strange thing was that the ball of light rolled through her body inch by inch. When it reached her abdomen and reached her heart, it was as if it was about to roll through her slender body and fly out of her mouth. Emolian and Hu Shichen were the quickest to react. They raised their hands and sent 2 bursts of sacred energy over, stopping the ball of white light from flying out. Emolian's fingertips moved slightly as she sent out several strands of saint power into Arbor's body. Hu Shichen quickly helped her suppress her restless conscience. While everyone was busy dealing with Qiao Qiao's strange behavior, they heard Long Qian's suppressed roar from the other side. Hold on. However, Long Shangyun, Long Shi, and the others could not suppress the black pearl at all. Holding on for 2 minutes was already their limit. Following which, he was violently sent flying by a violent force. Long Qian spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed onto the ground. In the blink of an eye, the black pearl suddenly transformed into a long black shadow that spiraled in the air and emitted a furious roar that shook the heavens and the earth. The black dragon claw suddenly came down from the sky and went straight for Jojo's heart. That gigantic dragon claw exuded an incomparably terrifying pressure. The pupils of Emolian, He Jiechen, Mu Xingchen, and the others shrank. The pressure of a saint beast? Such a terrifying aura? I'm afraid it's the aura of a middle mature stage holy beast, right? A golden light flashed and disappeared. 7th Yen, who had clearly grown a lot taller and had a much more mature face, suddenly jumped out of Prince Mo's space. He raised his hand and transformed it into a dragon claw, blocking a black dragon claw that swooped down at him. The youth frowned and grunted. While blocking the black dragon claw, he was forced to retreat several steps. Little 7, come back. Emolian's low and magnetic voice rang out. He did not summon 7th Yen just now. It was this brat who jumped out first to block the attack when he saw the situation was critical. Chapter 4375. However, although Xiaoqi had already entered the late stage of puberty, she couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as a mature holy beast. That black dragon was merely a translucent soul. Even Xiaoqi was barely able to withstand its attack. If it was allowed to fully recover, everyone here would be in deep trouble. At this time, Mo Lian and Zhi Chen had already completely understood. What was on Long Qian's staff wasn't a black pearl at all. Instead, it was a sealing pearl. This black dragon had been sealed inside the black pearl by someone using a special method. Presumably, many years had passed since then. It was currently in a translucent soul state. However, it was clear that as long as it absorbed enough holy power, it could still slowly recover its physical form. Arbor was half lying in Mo Lian's arms. She couldn't make a sound. She hung her head listlessly, allowing the blood at the corner of her mouth to drip onto the sandy ground. Jojo. Mo Lian hurriedly lifted her up a little and reached out to support her head. At the same time, the peony fairy Little Tai Sui and the others had already flown out of Paradise Planet. Without another word, they rushed to He Chen's side and began to fight with the black dragon. Bai Ning Shuang laughed heartily. She reached out to touch the air in front of her and repeatedly shouted, "How is it? How is it? Did the thing inside already kill that stoic face?" Long Shangyun covered her shoulder that had almost left after being patted. She glared angrily at Bai Ning Shuang. "Second aunt, did you hit your head on the ground? How could you open grandmother's restriction seal?" "Aha!" Bai Ning Shuang turned a deaf ear to Long Shangyun's angry shout. She reached out to touch the air in front of her, wanting to grab someone and ask about the current situation. "Second aunt." Long Shangyun's expression changed. Just as she called out the words, "Second aunt," she saw the translucent black dragon rush down. The dragon coiled its body and swept its tail heavily. Bai Ning Shuang, who was lying on the ground, was sent flying by the black dragon's tail and heavily smashed into the ground. How could her body withstand a holy beast's attack? He didn't even manage to catch his breath before he breathed his last. "Second aunt." Long Shangyun exclaimed in shock. Suddenly, she felt her arm lighten. She turned around and saw Long Huan pulling her back several steps until they reached a safe place. "Brother, what about second aunt?" Long Huan shook his head helplessly. She opened the black dragon's seal without permission. "I'm afraid this matter will not end well." Long Shangyun turned around and patted the black light barrier. She hammered it twice and clenched her fists. "We can't get out." "Heh, sacred beast barrier, do you think anyone can get out?" At this moment, everyone had already helped old Madame Long Qian to the siblings' side. "Grandmother, how are you?" Long Qian shook his head slightly and coughed twice. His gaze turned towards Arbor and he roared, "Mu Qiao, you quickly summon it to suppress it." "Jojo. Jojo." Mo Lian saw that she kept her head down and felt inexplicably uneasy. He held her waist and reached out to lift her chin slightly. As soon as he saw her, he was shocked. His Jojo's eyes were red with blood. It was as if he couldn't see anything alive in his eyes. "Jojo." Mo Lian was stunned and wanted to hug her. However, the little girl pushed his arm away. She stood up with a blank and cold expression. Her gaze landed on the black dragon that was roaring in the sky. In her tumultuous conscience, there was a terrifying fluctuation. Chapter 4376. If she could look inside herself right now, she would definitely be able to see that the snake sculpture in her inner world was cracking apart inch by inch under the repeated fluctuations of her consciousness, revealing sections of black scales that were engraved with profound runes. When Long Qian saw her standing there in a daze without moving, she couldn't help but shout anxiously, "Mu Qiao, what are you waiting for? Hurry up!" Arbor's body suddenly trembled, and a huge wave of pressure suddenly emanated from her body, rushing toward the black dragon in midair. Bow. Seventh Yen pulled back his tail that had hit the black dragon and turned to look at his master's wife in surprise. This little girl's body actually emitted a trace of an ancient sacred beast's pressure? She had many sacred beasts around her, but most of them were sacred beasts in their growth stage. Compared to this half-soul sacred beast in front of her, they couldn't be compared at all. But now, the sacred beast's pressure that was seeping out of her body had an unprecedented sense of oppression. In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black dragon abruptly broke free from the snake sculpture and flew out of Qiao Mu's inner world to protect its master. It swiped its claw at the black dragon in midair. Brr. The merfolk stared dumbfoundedly at the three dragons that were fighting inside the sacred beast barrier. Their ferocious and terrifying power would occasionally hit one or two innocent merfolk passers-by, turning them into a pile of dust. Cries of agony came from behind Long Qian. All the merfolk felt that they were unlucky to be involved in a fight between three giant dragons. How unlucky must one be to experience such a thing and be deeply troubled by it? At this time, Hu Shurchen, Little Tai Sui, and the others had already returned to Arbor's side. How is it? The crown prince had tried to get close to his wife countless times, but every time he was pushed back by his little wife without any hesitation. Hushirchen looked up and saw that the crown prince's handsome face looked as if there was nothing left to live for. Stop fooling around. Her conscience should be in a mess right now, right? For some reason the energy in her body is also in a mess. Let's calm down the divine energy in her veins first. Hushirchen tugged at Emolien and said. How could Emolien not know this in her heart? But even if she wanted to appease him, she had to get close to him. Jojo wouldn't even let him get close to him, which made him very anxious. Moreover, the blood-patterned black dragon that came out of Jojo's body was also very strange. Where did it come from? These people stayed in Xiao Qiao Starfield every day. He knew very well what kind of holy beasts there were in the Starfield and how many of them there were. But where did this dragon come from? Although the blood-patterned black dragon was a mature holy beast, it was a pity that it had just reached the early stages of maturity. If it joined forces with Shaoqi, they would be able to stop the brutal black dragon. But as time passed, it was hard to say. After all, no one knew how many years it had been asleep. Now that it had just broken out of the seal of the sculpture, it had yet to fully adapt. Long Qian used her scepter to knock on the sacred beast barrier behind her with a deep frown. She abruptly turned to Qiao Mu and said, Mu Qiao, what are you still hesitating for? Why are you in a daze? Quickly summon that thing to deal with the black dragon. If the sacred beast realm is not broken, we will all be innocently affected. Hurry up and break it. Break it. The mare people couldn't help but roar angrily. Long Qian's gaze was serious as he stared at Arbor without blinking. The latter turned a deaf ear to the many complicated roars around him. His gaze only landed on the black dragon's half-soul that was roaring in the air. As if it was summoned by something, it opened its small mouth and a bright white pearl flew out. Chapter 4377. 10,000-year-old Shark Pearl. Shark Pearl? It's the 10,000-year-old Shark Pearl. It's the real 10,000-year-old Shark Pearl. The genuine 10,000-year-old Shark Pearl. The 10,000-year-old Shark Pearl that had been polished and tempered by countless seniors was actually in this little stoic's body? What? This thought bubbled up in the merfolk's minds. It's Long Chuyun. It must be eldest Miss Long Chuyun who gave it to her. Long Qian, Long Shangyun, Long Qian, and all the mermaids were staring at the round jade bead in the air at the same time. Their eyes were burning with passion. Everyone stared fixedly at the round pearl that had abruptly leaped into the air, their emotions surging. They involuntarily straightened their bodies, wishing for nothing more than to pounce on it and grab it. Emolien, He Jiechen, and the others' eyes flickered. They glanced at the white pearl before looking back at Jojo. Arbor had completely lost consciousness at this time. He was only relying on his instincts to control the jade pearl to fly back and forth, up and down. The god power roaming in his body was wandering randomly through his meridians, and he couldn't control it for the time being. The little stoic's entire body shook. She clenched her fists and roared at the sky with all her might. She abruptly turned around, her eyes red as she coldly stared at the black dragon fighting in the air. That pure white pearl emitting a jade-colored light flew to the black dragon with a whoosh with a flick of her finger and fiercely tangled with it. White light exploded. As though this wasn't the pearl's first time fighting the black dragon, it was abnormally ferocious. She didn't care about the other two dragons and only focused on smashing the black dragon's head countless times. Every time it landed, it would cause the black dragon's half-soul to dim slightly. The black dragon roared, and its body flipped and smashed furiously in the air. The lightning it spat out attacked indiscriminately, instantly killing several merfolk. This sudden turn of events caused the merfolk to struggle out of their daze as though they had just woken up from a dream. They all cried out in alarm and dodged in all directions. Hurry and open this barrier. We can't get out of the sacred beast barrier. Why do you talk so much nonsense? The peony fairy sneered and waved the thunder pestle in her hand. If you can't get out, then die. So much nonsense that it's annoying. One of the mermen glared at the peony fairy and said angrily, How can you say that? If you don't have the ability, then shut up and wait for someone to save you. If you spout any more nonsense, this old lady will summon lightning to strike you to death right now. The merman immediately shrank back behind Long Hua, glaring at the peony fairy but not daring to say anything. Mu Qiao stole our race's sacred artifact, the 10,000-year mermaid pearl, a merman said indignantly. She should return it. Yes, it should be returned. Emolien was already in a bad mood. Hearing those mermaids and mermen's nonsensical words, she coldly glanced at the crowd. When he smiled, his eyes seemed to sparkle like a sky full of stars. When he was incomparably cold, it made people feel fearful and timid. The merfolk who were hooting instantly froze on the spot when she glared at them. Their muttering voices also quieted down. "Get into formation," Emolien ordered coldly. A group of purple forest guards immediately stepped forward to protect the crown prince. They formed a formation and moved forward. The thousand-face shield instantly erected in front of them, protecting them from the indiscriminate attacks that the black dragon threw at them from time to time. Emolien beckoned with her hand, and Seventh Yen immediately flew to her side. Chapter 4378. This black dragon was in a half-soul state, so their attacks were completely useless against its half-soul body. Everyone could only continuously use their spiritual energy to attack, but most of them were repelled by its enormous sacred power. They could barely move. Emolien stared coldly at the black dragon in front of her. With a wave of her hand, several pitch-black flames rustled down and flew onto the black dragon's body. Like exploding fireworks, they boisterously exploded on the black dragon's half-transparent soul body. The black dragon was originally about to flee like a rat after being beaten by the shark pearl. Now that it was immobilized by the pearl's light and struck by the sacred power that Emolien and the others flung over, its half-soul body became increasingly illusory and scattered, and it was on the verge of collapse. When the merfolk saw this, they instantly rushed forward while shouting and wrangling. "Hurry, it can't hold on any longer. Get ready. Get the sealing pearl ready and seal it again." As if struggling on its deathbed, the black dragon abruptly swooped down and spat out a mouthful of furious lightning at those clamoring merfolk. The impact immediately scattered the group, and the merfolk scrambled and wailed as they scattered. The shark pearl's jade-like and serene light enveloped the earth, emitting a sacred, flawless, and transparent light. At this moment, the black dragon that was firmly trapped by the light was roaring angrily as if it was extremely unresigned. Its eyes were wide open and its tail flipped and swayed. The flawless white light pressed down on that black dragon's illusory body and wrapped it up in balls. Not good, the 10,000-year-old shark pearl is going to capture the black dragon. Clan leader. Clan leader. The merfolk shouted anxiously. What should we do now? What do you mean, what should we do? That shark pearl is our river of forgetfulness's sacred item to begin with, and the black dragon is also a suppressed guardian beast. Right, if the shark pearl captures the black dragon, then so be it. As long as the crown princess returns the shark pearl to us. Arbor, who was in the divine ruin realm, suddenly roared at the sky. At the same time, the shark pearl, which was bursting with sacred white light, abruptly contracted and swallowed the entire black dragon. It flew out with a whoosh and swiftly flew into the little stoic's mouth. Chow chow. Emolien and the rest turned pale with fright as they rushed over. However, a white light flashed in Xiao Mu's hand, and like a sudden clap of thunder, it carved out a deep ravine in front of her, blocking Emolien, Zhichen, and the others' footsteps. At this moment, Arbor seemed to have entered a berserk state. His eyes were red and there was no one in his eyes. She turned her head around, her scarlet eyes filled with killing intent as she glared at the fearful merman in front of her. Long Qian's heart skipped a beat and she quickly shouted, "Quick! Disperse!" At the same time, a thunderous sword might swept toward the mermaids with the terrifying power of lightning. The explosive force spread out in all directions, sending the few mermaids in the front row flying and crashing heavily onto the ground. They clutched their chests and vomited blood. "Joe Arbor!" Long, she shouted in shock. Young Master Ding's expression changed slightly, and he quickly flashed away. His eyes flickered and he stopped to look in Arbor's direction. At this moment, the latter stopped to catch his breath and slightly raised his head, sweeping his cold gaze over Long Qian and the others. Long Qian's heart skipped a beat. Long, she reflexively tightened his grip on the long sword in his hand and stuttered, "Co-cousin, calm down." Xiao Mu's eyes were blank as she wielded her sword. Wisps of water spiritual energy accumulated on her sword, and in a split second, it streaked through the air toward Long Qian and the others with an unstoppable momentum. Chapter 4379. Oh no, she can't control the shark pearl in her body. The power belonging to the shark pearl in her body is starting to go berserk. Scatter! Long Qian shouted, his old face instantly flushing red. Who would dare to clash head-on with the thunderclap sword? Horror flitted across their faces, and following Long Qian's angry shout, they hastily dodged in all directions. thousands of thunderclaps galloped past like a magnificent army. At the bottom of the river of forgetfulness, the entire Long clan's residence was greatly shaken. The commoner merfolk outside the spirit realm also more or less felt the turbulent waves rolling above their heads, and they hastily found a place to hide. At this time, the little stoic stood alone in front of the thousands of ravines at the bottom of the sea, her body emitting a dazzling white light. Her fists were tightly clenched and her bones creaked. She suddenly roared into the sky, and a terrifying force exploded from her body. Everywhere the white light covered flowers and trees shattered into fine powder. The holy beast barrier that had been set up by the black dragon also completely shattered with a bang. Emolien, Hishurchin, and the others couldn't even get close, let alone the others. Everyone simultaneously raised their hands to block the dazzling white light in front of them. When the white light finally scattered, they saw the little stoic with her back facing them. Her shoulders trembled weakly, and she suddenly spat out another mouthful of blood. Her body weakly slid to the ground. With a clang, the thunderclap sword in her hand fell to the ground without her noticing. Jojo. Crown Prince Mo's heart was on the verge of shattering. With a flash, he flew across a deep crevice in front of him and caught her falling body. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, Holy Sun Mi Yen, Little Tai Sui Mu Xingqian, and the others also rapidly surrounded them. When they looked down, they saw the little fellow's eyes were tightly shut, her long eyelashes were trembling, her lips were tightly pursed, and her face was as pale as a sheet. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's heart sank, and his breathing quickened. He hastily grabbed Emolien. Quick, quick, suppress the shark pearl in her godly ruins first. The shark pearl was so powerful that it was only temporarily stabilized by the combined efforts of all the Transcendence Realm experts present. Long Qian supported herself with a long staff as she struggled to walk towards Emolien and the others. She said anxiously, "We have to think of a way to get the shark pearl out. She can't control her body at all." Previously, it was Chu Yun who took the initiative to seal the mermaid pearl in her body. When the power of the mermaid pearl awakens, her body will not be able to withstand it, nor will she be able to control it. It must be taken out immediately. What a load of nonsense. Emolien and Jichen were both enraged. They each threw out a fire spirit and a wood spirit. The powerful Saint Power rushed towards the old woman who could not stand steadily. "Grandmother!" Long, she exclaimed from behind. Long Qian's eyes narrowed and she quickly turned around to dodge. She barely dodged a fire spirit when the wood spirit viciously hit her in the chest. The old woman spat out a mouthful of blood, but her gaze was still extremely stubborn. "What I said is true. If you leave the mermaid pearl in her body, it will be like leaving a Saint Power pearl that will explode at any given time. You speak as if it's true. Who are you trying to fool?" Feng Zhangfei could not help but say angrily. If that black dragon sealing pearl was not suddenly broken by someone, why would the mermaid pearl lose control on the spot in order to suppress it? Why are we wasting our breath on them? "Let's go," the peony fairy said angrily. Emolien carried Arbor with both hands. After taking 2 steps, she turned around and looked at Long Qian coldly. She said in a low voice, "You knew about it from the start, didn't you?" Chapter 4380. So this time, you did everything possible to lure her back, not because clan leader Long has one foot in the grave and is in a hurry to see your granddaughter. It's because you want the shark pearl. Emolien's breathing was labored, and she did her best to suppress the boiling fury in her heart. When she spoke, her voice was laced with grief and anger, so gloomy that it was heartbreaking. "The dragon clan of Wang Chuan is truly disgusting." The peony fairy, Fairy Ginkgo, and the others glared fiercely at the dragon clan members before hastily following her. Long Qian coughed dully as she stared emotionlessly in the direction they left. "Grandmother, grandmother." Long Qian called out twice and couldn't resist letting out a long sigh. "Grandmother, why are you doing this?" Young Master Ding suddenly chuckled. He turned around and waved his hand, laughing loudly as he left. "The dragon clan of Wang Chuan is truly disgusting." "Ah." Long Qian angrily glared at his back and clutched her aching heart. "Let's go back first." Emolien was extremely fast. She carried Arbor back to Yun Court in a flash and placed him on the bed. Jojo was unconscious, and her Dantian, Godly Ruins realm, and conscious were both sealed, so she naturally couldn't communicate with Chocho. "Water's here, water's here. Give it to me." Emolien took the half-wet handkerchief from Fairy Ginkgo and carefully wiped the blood from the corners of the little stoic's lips. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Everyone disperse first." Ma Shurchen turned around and glanced at Feng Changqing and the others. Don't crowd around here. Go back and prepare. When Jojo wakes up, we'll leave this place. Emolian raised her small hand and wiped the bloodstains on her fingers. The blood on her hand was rarely other people's. It was all blood that she spat out. It was very glaring and gripped one's heart. Jojo's small face looked much more fragile with this injury. Thin veins could be seen under her jade-colored skin. Emolian threw the handkerchief into the water basin and reached out to help her up with trembling hands. He pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. His breathing was shallow as he lowered his head and leaned against her neck. If Arbor was awake, he would definitely be able to feel the slight trembling of her body, as well as the unhurried tears that slid to the bottom of her collarbone. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked in through the window. He reached out to stop Mu Xingqian, who was about to enter, and said softly, "Let them stay for a while. Emolian's heart is aching and she's blaming herself. Give him time to slowly recover. No matter what others say, it's useless." Mu Xingqian glanced at them worriedly and nodded with a sigh. Emolian continued to take care of Qiao Qiao until it was late into the night and all was quiet. He stayed by her side, changing a clean and moist handkerchief to cover her forehead from time to time. He held her small hand tightly, listened to her murmur lotus, and answered her Jojo anytime, anywhere. However, at this time, Arbor was already in a daze. His entire body felt heavy, as if he was drifting around on a small boat with nowhere to call home. She didn't know where she was, but she knew where her heart was going. "Emolian, Emolian, where are you?" she screamed anxiously in her heart. She heard a slow and low voice as if it came from the faraway sky, saying intermittently, "Jojo, don't be afraid. I'm always by your side. Always, always." She seemed to feel his warm lips on her hand, warm and sweet. Chapter 4381. But her body seemed to be grabbed by a strange force, and she had no choice but to follow the force of the fall. She kept falling, and falling. It was as if she had sunk into a boundless dream. Sinking, sinking, sinking endlessly. Wouldn't it have been better if you had boarded the ship? Why did you come back? Why did you come back? What right does a good-for-nothing like you, who can't even take care of yourself, have to stay by young master's side? Ridiculous. The woman questioned, and the sound of a whip pierced through the air, landing heavily on a frail body. Arbor stood in the corridor as if he was looking at someone else's remaining life. His eyes flickered and he looked on expressionlessly. He lowered his head to look at his transparent hands, which had turned into a wisp of soul, as if floating into an endless abyss of memories. Ah, so my previous life seemed to be a bit more miserable than what I remembered? Bang! The door of the room was suddenly kicked open. The second young master didn't have time to tie up his hair, and his black hair was messy as he broke through the door. Looking at the situation, he must have hurriedly put on his clothes after receiving the news, and quickly rushed to this room to save someone. "Shi Yongqian. Who told you to hit her?" A ruthless slap landed heavily on second Miss Shi's cheek. It immediately caused her white and tender skin to turn red. He took a few steps back from the slap and almost hit the cabinet door behind him. "Qin Xian, you actually hit me for this little pet? So what if I hit you? I'm still waiting to be killed." In his rage, the second young master didn't have time to think, and reached out to summon a long sword with white light lingering around it from his conscience. Second young master, second young master." Several students immediately rushed forward, stopping him and cupping their hands. "Second young master, you can't. Second Miss Shi's father sought refuge with our Qin estate. How can we kill his daughter? Will it disappoint everyone? Get out of the way." Qin Xian angrily pushed aside the students and quickly stepped forward. He didn't care about the blood and dirt, and reached out to pick up the dying woman on the ground. "Xiao Qiao, Xiao Qiao?" The woman who was picked up by him stared at him with lifeless eyes. Her body trembled slightly, and a large amount of blood gushed out from her mouth. It was obvious that her internal organs were injured, and she was severely whipped. "Xiao Qiao, don't be afraid. You will get better. You will definitely get better." Qin Xian's voice trembled. She kicked the disciple beside her, almost hysterical. "What are you standing there for? Why aren't you calling Ouyangsu over?" With a wave of his hand, Omega Kotoku took out a few pills from his inner world and stuffed them all into the woman's mouth. "Qinxin. Scram." Omega Kotoku mercilessly kicked away Shi Yongqian, who was walking towards him, and walked out with her in his arms. Arbor watched them from the porch, then turned and followed the anxious second son back to his room. "Xiao Qiao." Qin Xian placed the dying woman on the bed and gently held her hand. she said softly, if you want to cry, just cry. Don't hold it in. Arbor's soul floated forward and obediently sat on the small stool beside the bed. His clear and cold eyes reflected the pale and helpless face of the woman on the bed. Even though she was severely injured, she still didn't make a sound. She didn't even blink. Young Master Alchemist Ouyang-su is here. Don't talk nonsense. Come in quickly. Arbor turned his head and saw a man in simple but elegant white robes, with long hair tied into a crown, hurriedly enter the room with a medicine chest. Chapter 4382. Following behind him was a black-clothed man with tied hair. He had a brilliant smile and handsome features that she found somewhat familiar. Arbor sat on the small stool and involuntarily glanced at that person a few more times. Ouyang-su. Duguling, greetings to young sir. The two of them cupped their hands in greeting with graceful bearing, truly a pair of fine young masters in this chaotic world. Arbor suddenly had a flash of inspiration and instantly recalled who this Duguling was. Sir Jojo had once been intercepted by young Sir Omega Kotoku and his entourage beside Duchun River. Among them was the second young master's disciple called Ling. He disguised himself as a woman and tricked Jojo, but his identity was subsequently exposed by Duanyu. So it was him. Arbor couldn't help but be a bit dazed. It turned out that she had met so many people at this time in her previous life. Young Sir Omega Kotoku did his best to suppress the raging fury in his heart and bellowed at Ouyang-su, who was behind him, "Stop blabbering and come take a look." Ouyang-su sat down by the bed and Arbor's soul could only avoid him. "Miss Chiao, let me take your pulse," Ouyang-su said softly as he glanced at her. As usual, he saw her unperturbed and serene gaze. Those pitch-black eyes were filled with mockery without the slightest desire to live. A moment later, Ouyang-su stood up and gracefully bowed to the second young master. "Young sir, let's talk outside. Her condition is very bad," Ouyang-su whispered to young Sir Omega Kotoku in the corridor. He involuntarily cast a glance inside the window and sighed softly. Miss Chiao's heart is set on death and has no desire to live. After being struck by the purple firmament lightning dragon previously, 2 of her ribs were broken and haven't healed yet. Now that second Miss Sher's heavy whip has worsened her injuries, this subordinate, don't waste your breath. The second young master's suppressed roar interrupted Ouyang-su. You must save her, you must. I don't care what method you use, I want her alive. Young sir, this subordinate will certainly do his best. However, her depression is not beneficial to her injuries. It's best if she can release it. Hey. Arbor frowned and looked coldly at Duguling, who always liked to pretend to be a transvestite. Duguling had stolen her aunt and was talking to her previous life. You're so young. Do you really want to die? A person must have the will to live in order to have hope in the future. Duguling looked at her with a smile. You're still so young, why do you always want to seek death? Think about it, it's so good to be alive. You can drink wine, eat meat, and have endless spring flowers. It's enough for you to appreciate. Oh, of course. The world today can't see thriving greenery, but there has to be some hope. Who knows, we might see it in the future, Duguling Omega Kotoku entered the room and said in a deep voice. Okay. I'll go. Duguling felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly got up and ran out. Second Qin unhurriedly and lightly walked to the bedside with a head of black hair that hung down to his waist. She reached out and placed a very old doll on her chest. She wanted to touch her hair, but her fingers curled up and stopped. Last time it was my fault. I lied to you and said that I tore it apart, causing you to be heartbroken and have nightmares. I know I didn't treat you well in the past. But in the future I'll change, okay? People can't always look back on the past. They have to look forward. Omega Kotoku stood by the bed and looked down at her. Can you trust me this time? Chapter 4383. Arbor's eyes moved and her gaze landed on the old doll. This was the doll that her mother had given her in her past life and she had secretly given it to Shaolin. She remembered that when Shaolin died in her past life, she was still holding onto this doll. After that, when she was collecting her sister's body, she had kept this doll by her side. Now that she suddenly saw this doll, Arbor couldn't help but get closer to it, wanting to take a closer look. Was this real? Her transparent fingers passed through the doll's head, but she didn't grab anything. After all, she was just a spirit. How could she grab anything? Arbor lowered her head and saw that she was silently crying on the bed. She didn't make a single sound, but she could see the tears rolling down her cheeks. This feeling was really strange. It was as if she was watching someone else's tragic life. She wanted to reach out and hug the person who was crying silently. She wanted to pat her head and comfort her so that she wouldn't cry anymore. So, I was actually this depressed when I cried in my past life? She didn't even make a single sound, as if she would alarm someone if she made a sound. She just laid there and cried silently. She looked at the gauze above her head with a cold expression. Arbor didn't feel good about it. So, I cried a lot in my past life? As she thought about it, her gaze landed on the bed. She looked at her past life and let out a long sigh. Suddenly, her gaze froze as it landed on the stomach of her past life. He could clearly see a ball of something emitting a faint white light. Yes, it's the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl in my body. Arbor pondered for a moment and thought to herself, did I have the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl in my body in my past life? That's right. Based on what Long Chen and the others said, the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was given to her by her mother. That meant that she had this pearl in her past life. But why didn't she know anything about this pearl in her current life? Did she purposely seal it away, or did she not want to remember anything? If she had a physical body, Arbor would definitely break out in cold sweat. Because she realized that she seemed to have peeped into some profound mysteries buried deep in her heart. She seemed to know something. As far as his eyes could see, the 10,000-year mermaid pearl was emitting a gentle light that kept swaying in his previous life's body. When Omega Kotoku entered, the light slowly subsided. The soul that was wandering in Arbor had been wandering in front of his previous life for the past few days like a spirit behind his back. That second young master came to see her almost every day. This made Arbor feel very strange. Did she really lose a lot of her memories after she self-destructed? At least, she had never remembered this part before. It had almost become a habit for the second young master to visit her every day. It was as if he had changed into a different person. Suddenly he was very nice to her. However, in her previous life she was still the same. Usually she would only listen to him quietly and never interact with anyone. Oyang-su would come to check her pulse every afternoon. In the afternoon, Omega Kotoku would push her out to bask in the sun and get some fresh air. The whip wounds on her body were slowly getting better. One day, Arbor saw her fingers moving on the side of the bed. She couldn't help but widen her eyes in shock. How could this be? Arbor thought to herself. In the past, her limbs were all broken and she couldn't even move a finger. Why was it happening now? It wasn't an illusion or an illusion. Her fingers really moved. Chapter 4384. This is for you. A pitch-black ring was rudely tossed onto her head. A 15 to 16-year-old youth in black poked his head out of the window and snorted. He shouted at the person who was half lying on the bed in a daze, I whipped you before, so master whipped me 10 times. We're even now. That youth retracted his head from under the window and didn't wait for her reaction for a long time, so he suddenly poked his head back. Seeing that she was half lying there without moving, he simply flipped over and jumped in through the window. Why aren't you saying anything? He stomped to the bedside and glanced at her irritably, nagging, actually, it's all your fault. If you didn't suddenly bite master's finger like you wanted nothing more than to bite it off, why would I have smacked you like that? Hey, you're not a mute. Why aren't you saying anything? The youth couldn't help but feel exasperated when he saw that the other party didn't react at all after talking for a long time. The little stoic was still sitting on the small stool beside the bed, sizing up the youth in front of her. Could this be the sacred beast Purple Firmament Lightning Dragon's transformation? Arbor pondered for a moment and felt that he should have guessed the truth. Was there such a scene in the past? Why did this Purple Firmament Lightning Dragon look so dumb? Hey, it could be paired with 7th Yen, that little rascal. They were both Tsundra. Could it be that the attributes of dumb dragons were roughly the same? Seeing that she didn't utter a word for a long time, the youth was so angry that he directly picked up the ring he threw at her. He forcefully pulled her hand over and roughly put the ring on. I'm telling you, this defensive sacred weapon was forged from my scales. It's very strong. In the future, don't mention being smacked once by me. Even if I smacked you 100 times, nothing would happen to you. I'll guarantee your safety. Why is your face so stoic? I'm giving you a defensive sacred weapon, so why are you so grief-stricken? You should be smiling, you know. How about smiling? The youth bent down, and the long black hair trailing behind his head swayed lightly as he moved his head back and forth. What are you two doing? The little stoic turned around expressionlessly and saw young Master Omega Kotoku standing at the door with a solemn expression, his cold and severe gaze gazing at the two people inside the room. The youth blinked and looked back at the Omega Kotoku with an uneasy expression. Master. Get out. Omega Kotoku glanced at him and the latter quickly ran out of the door. The young man really didn't know why his master's gaze had suddenly become so cold. What did he do? Arbor could tell that the second young master was not in a good mood. When he walked to the bedside and sat down, Arbor could clearly feel that at this moment he really wanted to shrink back. Her fingers suddenly moved, probably with all the strength she could muster in her life, and finally she lifted two of them and touched the back of his hand. Second young Master Chin was instantly stupefied and lowered his head to look at her fingers. Jojo, your hand? He hurriedly stood up and shouted, "Quick, get Yangsu here." Young Master, Mrs. Condition has really taken a turn for the better, Yangsu also said in pleasant surprise. But it was really strange. He was very familiar with Miss Chiao's condition. The meridians in her limbs had been broken for many years. Even if he wanted to save them, it was impossible for them to improve in the short term without finding those god-rank medicinal herbs. Although he had been using medicine on her, the medicine shouldn't have taken effect so quickly. Chapter 4385. Arbor realized that she was recovering faster and faster in her previous life. She had originally been like a withered weed, but now under a strange power, her body was inexplicably recovering. Arbor even felt a little scared. It was as if there was something she didn't want to think about, but it was about to be revealed in front of her. What could it be? Arbor clenched her fists nervously. She looked down and saw that her soul seemed to be a little faint. She couldn't shake her hand smoothly. 2 months later, her previous life could finally walk. Looking at her struggling to walk, Arbor's heart was filled with mixed feelings. She looked at her deeply. The soul had no tears. If it wasn't for that, her face would have been wet with tears by now. So, it was so difficult for me to stand up in my previous life? I actually forgot everything about the past. I don't know if it's because I denied my past too much. It's too painful and I want to forget everything. In a person's life, there were too many things that they wanted to remember and didn't want to remember. Maybe she just remembered a lot of things. Xiao Mu followed her outside. She watched as she staggered to and fro with the crutch in her hand, trudging outside step by step with great difficulty. Arbor wanted to reach out and help her. She wanted to help support her previous life, who was miserable and unwilling to accept her fate. Maybe at that time she only needed one person and one pair of hands to help her. Xiao Mu stopped her fluttering steps and gazed at her back. Her previous life used her hands to push the door frame and moved out inch by inch. She stood in front of the door and looked up at the sky. She didn't know what she was looking at, but she didn't move her eyes away for a long time. Jojo? Why did you come out by yourself? The second son walked through the door towards her. His footsteps were hurried and fast. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of her. Arbor could clearly feel that the body leaning against the door frame trembled slightly. She still didn't like to come into contact with this person. She suppressed the discomfort in her heart and forced herself to look at him. What's wrong? I want to go somewhere. It was the first time he had heard her voice since he came to Arbor. Her voice was hoarse and dry as if it had been run over by a car twice. Yes, she remembered now. Her throat seemed to have been poisoned by second mixture. She didn't know if it had recovered after that. The teleportation array flashed and several people walked out of it. They were stunned when they saw what was in front of them. Low slopes, desolate tombs and luxuriant weeds spread for 10 miles. A few crows that had lost their feathers were perched on the branches. They were not afraid when they saw people coming. They only cawed as they walked. Arbor floated behind them like a spirit. Looking at the desolate graveyard, he couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. She seemed to recognize this place. It was dilapidated and desolate, like a boundless sea of bitterness from hell. There wasn't the slightest bit of greenery, only withered grass, broken trees, wild graves and black crows. It seemed to be the place where she had tidied up Shaolin'er's body. It seemed like he had moved the remains of his mother and brother here as well, therefore Arbor stood there in a daze. That feeling of wanting to cry but not being able to shed tears was simply too terrible. In her previous life, she moved through the desolate graveyard bit by bit, found a place to return and sat down. The sky was filled with paper money like snow. Arbor's heart ached. She only heard her murmur in a low voice, "I haven't come here for 3 years. Chapter 4386. To all of you. Arbor saw her pick up her wine cup and take a sip before sprinkling the rest of the wine on the graveyard beneath her feet. The second young master's breathing seemed to have become erratic. He stood nearby and watched for a long time. Ever since she returned from worshipping the graveyard, her previous life seemed to have become even quieter. She was very cooperative with the treatment every day. She ate whatever Ouyang Su told her to eat and took whatever medicine he told her to take. At night, a faint white light would emit from her abdomen. At this point, Arbor had no choice but to take this shark pearl seriously. It was a fact that she had always been unwilling to think about, and had always been unwilling to admit. It was the shark pearl. It really was this 10,000-year-old shark pearl. At this moment she should understand why the wounds on her body would often disappear miraculously. It was the effect of the shark pearl. After she entered the water, she was like a fish in water, as if she had become one with the water spirit of heaven and earth. This was also the effect of the shark pearl. She recalled the many inconceivable things that had happened to her in the past. Arbor made a bold conjecture. The shark pearl should have three main effects. First, it could fuse with her body into water. The shark pearl could allow her to breathe freely in water, and it wouldn't be strenuous for her to run and walk. Second, it had astonishing recovery abilities. Thinking back, what was Lady Holy Water's thought when she first came into contact with holy water at the Holy Water sect? This little girl is so fresh. Her body is filled with the moisturizing taste that Lady Holy Water likes the most. What did that mean? Lady Holy Water could sense the abundant water spirit energy in her body the moment she came into contact with her. The shark pearl was born to melt water in all forms and was not inferior to holy water. Hence, the reason why Lady Holy Water targeted her and wanted her to become a host wasn't because of how talented she was but because of the 10,000-year-old shark pearl in her body. When Lady Holy Water first saw her, she wanted to get close to the shark pearl. However, this 10,000-year-old shark pearl had been sealed in her previous life. It wasn't until she experienced countless tribulations and broke through her body's limits that the seal loosened and slowly started to take effect. However, it was different in this life. In this life, the seal on the shark pearl became unstable when she came into contact with Lady Holy Water at the sect. Holy Water was attracted to the shark pearl, so how could the shark pearl not be attracted to holy water? Hence, the seal on her shark pearl should have already started to loosen back then at Seekong Planet's Jiaozhong base. She was slightly injured when she exploded the Mystic Beast Forest Mystic Realm core, but the shark pearl healed her on the same day. After that, this inexplicable healing ability remained. In the past, he could not figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. Now that he thought about it from the start to the end, wasn't this the recovery ability of the shark pearl? No wonder the little tree said that even the life force of the wood spirit could not recover so quickly. How powerful was the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl? In her previous life, this 10,000-year mermaid pearl had truly healed her limbs and body at this time, mending her damaged body, allowing her to slowly stand up, walk outside to look at the sunlight outside. The third effect of the merman's pearl should be to automatically protect the host, expel ghosts, and purify all unclean things. So even though she was able to use the ghost summoning talisman, she had never been able to see any ghostly spirits. No ghostly spirits were able to get close to her. This should be the reason. She still remembered that when she first entered the Divine Prefecture and stepped into the Milky Way, endless saint power surged towards her. At that time, it was the mermaid pearl that protected her from the saint power and activated its automatic defense. And now she could cultivate on her own even when she was sleeping. She was absorbing the specks of divine power around her without noticing anything. Chapter 4387. It probably had something to do with the 10,000-year-old shark pearl. The 10,000-year-old shark pearl was so powerful that obtaining it was like obtaining a source of power. How could such a sacred item not move one's heart? How could one not be happy with it? Arbor didn't have a physical body at the moment. She was just thinking about it habitually, pacing back and forth in the room. She understood. She finally understood. Fan Xiuha. Fan Xiuha had been ordered by Mu Qingya to study her inner world because she wanted the shark pearl, right? Mu Qingya, this woman, had indeed hidden her true intentions well. Why did he always make her mistakenly think that it was a love affair or a grudge? Who knew that it was actually for this 10,000-year-old shark pearl? Arbor's soul couldn't help but shudder at this thought. Mu Qingya really made her hair stand on end. She had arranged so many things to target her and thought of ways to break her wings. She even controlled her like in her previous life and threw her into that dark and shabby underground laboratory. Just to dig out the shark pearl in her body? But she didn't tell Fan Xiuha anything. She only let him study her inner world. Shark pearl, 10,000-year-old shark pearl. Mu Qingya actually wanted this shark pearl in her dreams? Qiao Mu wanted to look up at the sky and laugh heartily, but the abnormally sour and bitter feeling in her heart prevented her from even crying. She thought about how sad her past life was. How could he forget such an important thing? Once he did, he would forget it for a lifetime. She couldn't remember it at all. Mu Qingyao wanted the shark pearl. The Wangchuan dragon family also wanted this shark pearl. They all wanted it. Did she have to give it to them just because they wanted it? What a joke. This 10,000-year-old shark pearl was left to her by her mother, so it was hers. She was stupid in the past and didn't know the reason. Now that she knew, she would take good care of it. She had to go back. Go back immediately. Go back to Jojo's side. Her soul struggled for a while. As if sensing her restlessness, Emolien hastily reached out to hold her slightly cold small hand. A pair of warm hands held her small hands firmly in his and cupped them. Jojo, do you feel cold? Jojo hasn't woken up yet? Mu Xingchen walked in and glanced at the bed worriedly. You can't just stay here all the time. Go eat something. Mu Xingchen glanced at Emolien and couldn't help but sigh. It had only been 3 days, and this fellow had almost turned himself into something that was neither human nor ghost. Emolien ignored her and continued to hold Arbor's hand, muttering, Jojo, Jojo. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over and extended his finger to release a strand of divine consciousness. He frowned slightly and only withdrew his divine consciousness after a long while. Logically speaking, he should have woken up. At this time, Arbor's divine ruins realm and consciousness had all stabilized. This morning they could all contact Qiuqiu. Why didn't she wake up? She's in a dream. Xikong Fuling's cold voice sounded from outside the window. Beside her stood the smiling young Master Ding. Miss Xikong. Mu Xingchen was desperate and hurried over to push open the door. Do you have a way to wake Jojo up? Of course. Xikong Fuling picked up her nightmare demonic flute. The ancients used to fight poison with poison. This saying is not false at all. I can enter a dream with a dream and order him to wake up immediately. Will it hurt his divine consciousness? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal frowned and asked in a low voice. Chapter 4388. Xikong Fuling shook her head decisively. Of course not. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Mu Xingchen both glanced sideways at Emolien. This matter still had to be decided by Emolien. Should they let Xikong Fuling interfere in Jojo's matter? What were the chances of success of entering a dream with a dream that Xikong Fuling spoke of? No one could be sure if it was really as she said, that Jojo's divine consciousness would not be harmed at all. Xikong Fuling did not force them. She only glanced at Emolien and said mildly, You'd better make a decision as soon as possible. In her situation, if she can't withdraw in time, it will harm her divine consciousness instead. In an especially serious situation, she may not be able to come out after entering a dream. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glared at her. Xikong Fuling silently shut her mouth and turned to walk out. I'm not exaggerating. It's not impossible for you to do it. Emolien's gloomy voice sounded faintly. But I want to enter the dream personally to bring her out. What? Xikong Fuling's expression grew increasingly serious. This is very dangerous. If your divine consciousness leaves your body and enters her dream, there's no way to reverse the situation if anything happens. You have to consider it carefully. Emolien stood up and glanced at her coldly. You strongly object to me entering the dream. Do you want to take the opportunity to spy on something? Xikong Fuling's expression darkened as she turned to look at Ding Yun beside her. But Ding Yun said with a smile, Okay. Xikong Fuling could not help snorting and pursing her lips disdainfully. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at her. So many evasions. Don't tell me Emolien guessed correctly? Xikong Fuling glared at the latter. Mu Xingchen saw that the atmosphere was not good and hurriedly smiled to smooth things over. Miss Xikong, with Emolien's help, I believe that you can definitely pull Jojo out of the dream faster. Let's try. Holding a pitch-black nightmare demonic flute, Xikong Fuling coolly swept a glance at the group. Let's get the ugly words out of the way first. Once your highness enters the dream, you must follow my instructions. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to shoulder the responsibility if something were to happen and you or Qiaomu were to be harmed. She spoke in an enigmatic tone, but Emolien didn't pay much attention to her. He merely looked at Qiaomu on the bed and grasped her hand, nodding absent-mindedly. Xikong Fuling turned her head and exchanged a glance with Cult Master Ding. A devilish smile appeared on the corners of the latter's lips. He tilted his head slightly and said softly and slowly, Since we've agreed, then let's go and prepare first. The peony fairy leaned against the door and turned her head to look at the back of the siblings. She raised her eyebrows slightly and asked with a faint smile, Are they trustworthy? Little Tai Sui rolled its eyes. I also don't think it's trustworthy. Mu Xingqian glanced at them and sighed softly. But what that Miss Sikong said is not completely unreasonable. If you want to enter a dream, then so be it. What do you need to prepare? It really seems like you're stalling for time. Little Tai Sui snorted and waved his little hand slightly. He glanced at the silent Mo Lien. Hey, what's your plan? Say it. If you don't say it, how are they going to cooperate? The peony fairy smiled and patted little Tai Sui's shoulder, provoking an angry glare from him. Mo Lien picked up his wife and walked out, saying coolly, Many thanks. I do need your help. Chapter 4389. Little Tai Sui rolled his eyes at his back. I'm not used to being so polite all of a sudden. Yuan Shurchin couldn't help but laugh. She walked over and grabbed little Tai Sui. If you're worried, just worry. There's nothing to be ashamed of even if you say it. What's wrong with you? You always like to talk sarcastically. Little Tai Sui's face immediately flushed red. He was so angry that he wanted to struggle free from Yuan Shurchin's claws. Who has the leisure to worry about that guy? Let go, let go. What kind of scandal is this for a real man to pull and pull? Yuan Shurchin directly glanced at his short figure out of the corner of her eye. Sorry, I couldn't tell that you were a real man. Little Tai Sui was so angry that he wanted to kick her. Shut up. Everyone left the court and went to the Fangtai waterside pavilion in front of them. They saw Mo Lien standing there with Arbor in her arms. Cult Master Ding and Sikong Fuling walked down from the balcony and smiled at everyone. It's about time. Follow me. Everyone followed him into the waterside pavilion. At a glance, they saw that many talisman papers had been used to set up a spirit-guiding talisman array that wasn't particularly complicated. Mo Lien walked over with Arbor in her arms and gently placed it in the center of the talisman array. She then sat down and supported Sikong Fuling's hand. Sikong Fuling flicked the nightmare demonic flute in her hand and said indifferently, After entering the dream, you must bring it out within 2 hours. Otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted. If it's more serious, it will stimulate your divine sense. You have to pay attention to the time. Mo Lien coldly replied, Let's begin. Without waiting for Sikong Fuling to retort, little Tai Sui, Peony Fairy, Ginkgo Fairy, Thin Tuchuo, and Dao Wuji all sat outside the talisman array. They each guarded a corner and joined forces to set up the array. A light barrier fell on the talisman array. The 5 people entered the state and closed their eyes in silence. Sikong Fuling slightly tightened her grip on the nightmare demonic flute and turned to look at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was standing leisurely outside the talisman array. Why doesn't venerable Immortal Lord join their defensive array? Infuriating, this was clearly not trusting her, Sikong Fuling. The reason why the 5 of them had joined hands to set up the defensive array was to prevent her from secretly causing trouble for Prince Mo. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at her innocently. He blinked and smiled. One must always be wary of others. Don't you think so, Miss Sikong? Gritting her teeth, Sikong Fuling turned back to glance at Cult Master Ding. If her brother hadn't dragged her here to save Arbor, she wouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. She wouldn't have begged to stay here and be doubted by others. I'm sorry. Mu Xingqian hastily stepped forward to appease Sikong Fuling, just like when he was putting out the fire. Miss Sikong, this matter is of great importance. It's understandable for them to be a little more careful. Sikong Fuling coldly glanced at Mu Xingqian. Ding Yun, who was by the side, did not take it to heart as he smiled. Fuling, no need to mind. You will use your actions to prove, slap, the truth in the face. Let Venerable Immortal Lord know that they are really thinking too much. Sikong Fuling snorted and nodded. She reached out to pick up the nightmare demonic flute. Prince Mo, there may be miasma disturbance in the dream. You must not forcibly break it so as to avoid harming Arbor's soul. After saying this, Sikong Fuling could not be bothered to say anything else. A sinister tune immediately sounded. Like a cold stream from a cold spring, it seeped into everyone's hearts inch by inch. It was so cold that they couldn't help shivering and cowering slightly. Chapter 4390. Arbor struggled bitterly for 2 days, but she still couldn't break out of this soul state. She was a little worried. What was this situation? If she was in a dream, she was actually like a bystander floating around behind her previous life. If she wasn't in a dream, everything in front of her was too realistic. The sun rose and set. Autumn left and winter came. Counting the days, she seemed to have already been with her previous life for 4 months. In these 4 months, she had once again witnessed how difficult it had been for her in her previous life. She watched as she walked on the ground and continuously exercised. She stumbled, fell, stood up, and fell again. Until now she could already walk stably. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl in her previous life didn't seem to have such excellent recovery ability as it did in this life. Arbor thought to herself, it's probably because the mermaid pearl seal was only torn open a little in her previous life, so not much power flowed out. Unlike her current life, when the mermaid pearl fought the black dragon at the bottom of the river of forgetfulness, the seal was completely broken. Hey stoic face, look here and here. Where are your eyes looking? A young man's clear voice suddenly sounded at the entrance of the courtyard. Arbor turned around and saw the black-clothed young man transformed from the stupid dragon standing in front of the pavilion under a pear tree that hadn't bloomed for a long time. He looked over with a smile. The previous life looked at him expressionlessly. Her long hair fluttered slightly in the cold wind. She was dressed in a plain snow-white robe, and her eyes were calm. Arbor was a little dazed for a moment. Why does this feeling of looking into a mirror feel so strange? Looking at her is like looking at my own stoic face. Arbor subconsciously reached out to touch his small face. So I've been stoic for 2 lifetimes? Is this your sword? He ran over and handed her a purple-black long sword that looked a little old. Although her previous life's limbs had recovered quite well, she obviously couldn't pick up such a heavy sword. So Qiao Mu then saw that sword fall from her arms to the ground with a bang, smashing into the muddy ground. The purple firmament thunder dragon curled his lips and bent down to pick up the sword. He patted the dirt off the sword and whispered, "Why is a girl like you carrying such a heavy sword?" Arbor floated in front of them and reached out to touch his sword. There was a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. She had once dug out this sword from a pile of corpses. In her previous life, it had always been by her side, cutting down countless zombies. Although in the end, it had become so blunt that it could not cut anything, it was still a thought in her mind. Everything had changed too much in this life. Even if she tried her best to find it, she was afraid that she would not be able to find it. Therefore, she never thought of looking for it in the first place. There were some things and things that were enough to be remembered in one's heart. There was no need to seek perfection in everything. Here. The youth pushed the sword into her arms. Such a heavy sword in the future, let the armament master refine it for you. No need. Classmate Purple Firmament Thunder Dragon blinked and suddenly jumped up. Are you talking to me? Did the heavens open their eyes today? One had to know that his master had asked him to protect this stoic face. He usually came to this courtyard for a stroll when he had nothing to do. He didn't know how many times he had talked to her, but she never responded. Many times the youth was about to shut himself off. When a mute speaks, an iron tree blossoms. Chapter 4391. Qian Xing glanced at him. No. Purple Firmament Thunder Dragon couldn't keep up with her thoughts and scratched his head dumbly. No what? But Qian Xing ignored him and laboriously hugged her sword as she turned around. Her arms still felt weak and the heavy sword slid to the ground once again. Purple Firmament Thunder Dragon bent down to pick it up and vigorously patted the dirt and dust off it. He had a flash of inspiration as he exclaimed, I got it. You're saying there's no flower, right? Arbor couldn't help but roll her eyes. When she turned around, she saw 2 young sirs in snow-white robes strolling over from one end of the corridor. Their robes were light and broad, their sleeves fluttering. Their features were picturesque, as if in a dream. It was actually eldest young Master Qin and that 5th young Master Qin whom she had met a few times? Arbor naturally felt an indescribable shock. Why doesn't she remember anything? From the looks of it, she really did know quite a few people from the Qin estate in the past. She vaguely remembered how she felt when she first saw Omega Kotoku at the Qin estate's entrance as a servant girl. Some were stunned, some were shocked, and some were confused. She recognized this nightmarish person, and she also recognized his pair of cold and beautiful eyes. But she couldn't remember his name. Did she really not remember, or was she deliberately trying not to remember? It was completely unknown now. As Qiao Mu stood stiffly in that courtyard, she could clearly hear eldest young Sir Qin's low, teasing chuckle. Who is that? Eldest young master, 5th young master, this is 2nd young master's Miss Qiao. The steward's voice lowered. 2nd younger brother seems to be slacking off recently. Eldest brother, I think that girl is quite nice. She's much better than that noisy 2nd young Miss Sure. Eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but burst into laughter. In your opinion, it's better not to make a fuss than to make a fuss. Arbor stood there in a daze for a while. Her memories were in a mess and she couldn't connect them. When had she ever seen so many people? Even worse, since she had already stood up in her previous life, why did it feel like all her limbs were broken and she had never crawled back up in her subsequent memories? Was she still missing an important part of her past? What was it? What was it? Arbor's soul floated in the air, reaching out to hit his own head. However, she heard the Omega Kotoku's calm voice coming from the entrance of the courtyard. "Jojo, I've brought the person you wanted to see." Arbor subconsciously looked over, and his eyes couldn't help but sway slightly. She saw a skinny young man in green standing 5 steps away from the second young master, staring at her in a daze. Of course, the young man wasn't looking at her. His gaze went past her and looked at his previous life standing on the stairs. Arbor turned around and looked at her. The former life's eyes reddened and she suddenly smiled at that person. In an instant it was like a blooming flower. That smile also made Arbor feel a little surprised. "I actually look this good when I smile? I'm not being narcissistic. Although this face is pale and without any makeup, it is still beautiful when she smiles." So this is where I first met Duamuqing. I don't seem to remember anything. While Arbor was in a daze, she suddenly felt a slight ripple in the air in front of her. A pair of hands abruptly reached out from the torn void and hugged her tightly. "Who is it?" Arbor heard the 2 young masters of the Qin estate shout angrily. 2 gusts of wind followed. Chapter 4392. However, she was immediately pulled into the spatial fissure. She couldn't help but pat her chest as she mused. Eldest Qin and Omega Kotoku, these 2 people are quite sharp. She was merely a soul. When she was pulled out of the dream, there was a faint spatial fluctuation, and the 2 of them immediately detected a clue. It truly wasn't easy. That pair of hands that tore open the void just now was undoubtedly her dear husband's. However, Arbor couldn't help but frown when she saw that she was in a boundless white fog. What was going on? Didn't hubby pull her out of that dream? Why was hubby gone now and she was the only one left? Why couldn't she even see a ghost in this white fog? "Hubby, quickly come out," the little stoic called out in displeasure with a stoic face. She ran back and forth in the white fog for who knew how long, but she still didn't see his figure. What was going on? Could it be that this white fog was also her dream? She actually hadn't escaped from the dream yet? From afar, she seemed to see a figure continuously waving at her. Arbor strained her eyes to look over and saw a woman walking over from the rolling fog. She held a flute in her hand, and a demonic tune rose in spirals. This flute tune sounded familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before. Arbor was slightly alarmed and she looked down at her soul. This drifting appearance truly made people feel very helpless. The rolling white fog in front of her didn't seem to disperse, and the flute tune was getting closer and closer. When Arbor saw the figure of the person in front of her clearly, she couldn't help but be shocked. It was Sikong Fuling? Did Sikong Fuling enter her dream? Hubby clearly grabbed her just now, but the 2 of them separated in the blink of an eye. Could it be this Sikong Fuling's doing? "Quickly come over." Sikong Fuling was also somewhat exhausted at this time. Arbor's dream simply made her want to vomit blood. Although she had mentally prepared herself that a crafty little girl like her would definitely be engulfed in white fog in her dream, she reckoned that she wouldn't be able to see anything useful. However, she still didn't expect that this girl would be so deranged. How was this white fog? It was simply level 18 fog, alright? As soon as she entered the Arbor dream, she almost lost her sense of direction. She had no idea where to go. Alright, I won't be able to find any useful information anyway. It was better to get this swindler out of here as soon as possible. As Sikong Fuling thought this, her heart couldn't help but feel stifled when she saw the young lady's expressionless face and suspicious gaze. She really regretted entering the dream to see this guy. Wouldn't it be better to have so much free time to eat melon seeds and drink tea? Why did he have to come and help Prince Imo enter his dreams? Why did his body suddenly fly up? By the time Sikong Fuling realized it, she had already flown out and landed heavily in the thick fog. Should he thank this stoic face for making the surrounding fog so dense? She fell into the thick fog, but she was not injured. When she stood up with a stupefied look on her face, she saw that Imo Lien had already rushed to Arbor's side and pulled her into his embrace. Sikong Fuling couldn't help but secretly grind her teeth. She had deliberately used the sound of the flute to separate the 2 of them. However, she didn't expect that this guy, Prince Imo, would actually be able to return so quickly. "Hubby." The little stoic felt extremely aggrieved when she saw him. "Why did you take so long to come?" She had been on tenterhooks in her dream for 4 months and couldn't even leave. It was truly worrying. Emolien hastily hugged his wife, his heart aching terribly. Jojo, it's my fault I came late. Punish me, punish me, punish you for kissing me. Chapter 4393. Sikong Fuling's jaw was about to drop. Why did this Prince Emo seem to be even more stinky and shameless than when he was on Sikong Planet? Who were you letting down by publicly throwing dog food in front of her like this? Wait a minute. Sikong Fuling suddenly thought of something and sized the two up with an inexplicably strange gaze. You guys, how is this possible? Hugging each other? Strictly speaking, this was Arbor's dream. How could Prince Emo, as an external divine sense body, be hugging Arbor's soul body? She had to calm down. She breathed in, and exhaled again to calm her mind. Sikong Fuling glared at them. Seeing the two of them hugging each other intimately, she couldn't help but get angry. Still not leaving? Look at this stoic face. He created so much fog here, but we don't even know where the exit is now. Emolien hugged his wife and turned to glare at Sikong Fuling. As expected, you're up to no good. He had clearly hugged Jojo just now, but the scene before his eyes had changed in an instant. The two of them had probably been disturbed by Sikong Fuling's flute music, which was why they had inexplicably separated. Sikong Fuling naturally wouldn't admit it. She said angrily with a cold face, "Isn't that because this stoic face is so guarded? Who else could set up fog in a dream so dense that we can't even see the path clearly?" As she spoke, she felt something bump into her back. Sikong Fuling was greatly alarmed. She gripped the nightmare demonic flute tightly and swiftly turned around. Who is it? This stoic face wanted to trick her again, right? Sorry Miss Sikong. Did I accidentally hurt you? Mu Xingqian's voice drifted into her ears through the thick fog. Sikong Fuling gritted her teeth in anger and thought, this stoic face, this swindler, made the place she was standing in especially dense fog. He actually only realized now that Mu Xingqian was behind her. Why are you here? I saw that a lot of time had passed, but you and Emolien still hadn't returned. In my impatience, I followed you into the formation. Sikong Fuling took 2 deep breaths and couldn't help but twitch her mouth when she turned around. Mu Xingqian was clearly standing behind her, but she couldn't even see his shadow through the layers of fog. Sikong Fuling could only continue to play her flute to explore the path, occasionally speaking to Mu Xingqian expressionlessly. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Your sister is such a troublemaker. She messed up her dream. If you don't obediently follow my flute music, you won't be able to leave and will be locked in your sister's dream forever. Mu Xingqian hurriedly said, Miss Sikong, don't worry. I've been following behind you. Where did my sister and brother-in-law go? How would I know? Sikong Fuling unhappily roared at him. If she knew, why would she still be here talking to him like a poor mushroom? While he was talking to Mu Xingqian, Arbor and Emolien both disappeared. Sikong Fuling had an impulse to run over right now, grab that stoic face and kick her to death with punches and kicks. I really have nothing better to do than to get involved in such muddy water. Hurry and leave. Sikong Fuling's flute music paused for a moment before she discovered that the thick fog all around them was sweeping over. Thus, she didn't dare to stop playing and continued to use the nightmare demonic flute to search for a way out. She could only secretly curse Arbor in her heart for causing trouble. What do you think she's after? She's just an onlooker. Isn't it good to just watch the show? Chapter 4394. It was her fault for not being rewarded for her kindness. Yet, she had to come here and cause such a scene. Miss Sikong, be careful. A strong force suddenly pushed her to the side from behind. At the same time, a black dragon's claw suddenly reached out from the rolling fog and flattened the hillside in front of her in an instant. Fuck, what's going on? Sikong Fuling looked at the scene in front of her with trepidation. Just a moment ago, the scenery in front of her rapidly changed. Without the dense fog, a clear sky instantly appeared before her eyes. At this time, she and Mu Xingqian were standing on a barren hillside. And the black dragon that was flying in the air and extending its claw toward her, its entire body exuded a terrifying holy beast's coercion. With her current realm, let alone a claw from a holy beast, she was afraid that a single toe from it would be enough to pulverize her. It's a black dragon. Mu Xingqian couldn't help but be alarmed. That ancient black dragon. Sikong Fuling clutched the nightmare demonic flute tightly and shouted as she ran in a panic, Mu Xingqian, you recognize this guy? Jojo was previously injured by this black dragon at the bottom of the River of Forgetfulness and then fell into a coma, Mu Xingqian said briefly and then asked with a puzzled expression, but why is it here? Why are you saying so much? It's chasing after us. Sikong Fuling was so anxious that she stomped her feet and roared. She turned around and hurriedly ran forward while playing the flute. Mu Xingqian was naturally not stupid. Looking at this black dragon's ferocious appearance, it didn't seem to be here for a heart-to-heart talk in Jojo's dream. This black dragon inexplicably appeared and suddenly swept toward them. The two of them rolled and crawled down the hillside and rushed into the forest in front of them without a care. The more they ran, the more familiar it seemed. Fuck, this looks a bit like the Phoenix Mulan. Sikong Fuling roared against the wind. It is the Phoenix Mulan. Miss Sikong, quickly get out of the way. Mu Xingqian pushed Sikong Fuling away. The black dragon's huge tail swept across a circle of trees in a split second, sweeping up the towering trees behind them and flinging them away. The two of them were running at full speed. From time to time, the dragon would poke its ferocious head out from between the gaps of the trees, extending its claws and slapping the two of them on the back. Oh my god, what kind of pervert did I provoke? Sikong Fuling's face scrunched up again and then scrunched up again. She looked up to the sky and howled in grief and indignation. I know. Your sister is a freak. She materialized the dreamscape. What? You still don't understand? Sikong Fuling angrily clenched her fists as she ran through the forest. The stoic face really is a pervert. She views me, who invaded her dream, as an enemy. Materialization of the dreamscape, summoning corporeal ferocious beasts. She wants to keep me here. How is that possible? Sister won't hurt us. Why not? What do you think she won't do in her dreams? Also, not us. It's me. Mu Xingqian silently lowered his eyes. I think she did it unintentionally. Ah. Sikong Fuling madly charged forward. Arbor, get out here. Damn stoic face, get out here. If the stoic face was in front of her right now, she would definitely pounce on her and bite her to death. Regardless of whether it was intentional or not, the fact that this damn pervert could do such a thing proved that she wasn't human at all. What kind of person could be so strange and come up with so many deceptive tricks in their dreams? It's her, it's only her. Chapter 4395. Mu Xingqian ran wildly with Sikong Fuling and hurriedly placated her. Miss Sikong, don't panic. I'll call younger sister and have her stop first. Sikong Fuling looked up at the sky in grief and indignation, wanting to cry but having no tears. She rolled and crawled to avoid several trees that pounced on her. Arbor, get out here. Sikong Fuling roared angrily, startling countless birds in the forest. Haha, the stoic face really did create a complete forest of phoenix trees in his dream. Miss Sikong, don't panic. Let's head forward. There's a cave up ahead. Let's go in and take shelter. Arbor pulled Emolien's hand and suddenly appeared at the top of a tree. Why did Big Brother also come in? Jojo, don't let your imagination run wild. Put away that black dragon. Emolien was speechless. Big Brother can't handle it. What kind of joke was this? He and Ma Yingqian weren't a match for that mature sacred beast even if they worked together, let alone a mere deity realm Mu Xingqian. Okay. Arbor nodded. With a thought, that black dragon that was chasing after Sikong Fuling and was about to bite off half her head with a crunch. Amidst Sikong Fuling's wailing and howling, she abruptly transformed into a black whirlwind that hurriedly swept into the sky and abruptly disappeared without a trace. Sikong Fuling fell to the ground with trembling legs, her calves twitching uncontrollably. Her eyes contained indescribable horror as she looked at Arbor and Emolien, who floated to the ground. You. Sikong Fuling pointed at Arbor with a trembling finger. She was stifled in her heart and couldn't take a deep breath for a long time. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. You entered my dream with ulterior motives and wanted to spy on my past. You wanted to trick me. Who wants to trick you? Who can trick you? Sikong Fuling trembled with anger and had the misconception that she didn't want to talk to this stoic face anymore. Arbor extended 2 fingers and gestured with his eyes. I saw it. Startled, Sikong Fuling's small face contorted slightly. You entered my dream and used the flute to find the way. You wanted to find me before Emolien did. You deliberately used the flute to lead him to another fork in the road. If not for the fact that Jojo's lotus had the ability to tear through the void, he would probably have to go around in circles several times in this dream realm and might not be able to find her before Sikong Fuling. Emolien gave Sikong Fuling an icy look. In the end, Sikong Fuling fell silent. She had never intended for Emolien to get involved. Unfortunately, he insisted on entering the dream and personally bringing Arbor out, which really made her feel very inconvenient. I sincerely wish to enter a dream and take you away from this place, Sikong Fuling suddenly said. Arbor nodded calmly. I know. Otherwise, how do you think you've survived until now? Sikong Fuling looked at her cold and bright eyes and suddenly shuddered a little. Sikong Fuling seemed to have read some kind of meaning from her eyes. Sikong Fuling only felt her back drenched in cold sweat. She inexplicably felt her whole body go limp, as if she couldn't muster up any strength from this fright. Sikong Fuling's cold sweat trickled down. Do you suppress? You entered my dream. Do you still think you can do anything? Arbor shot her an indifferent glance. Mu Xingchen hurriedly pleaded for leniency for Sikong Fuling. Younger sister, Miss Sikong probably misunderstood because she was curious. Chapter 4396. At this time, Sikong Fuling was naturally certain that Arbor was completely unaffected by the nightmare demonic flute's control. Even in a dream, Arbor could counter her with just a wisp of his soul. Materialization of dreams and suppression of dreams, Arbor seemed to be innately adept at all of this. He used it effortlessly and effortlessly. Younger sister, Miss Sikong probably didn't intentionally pry into your dream. Mu Xingchen did his best to build a bridge to put out the fire and diligently smooth things over. For the first time, Sikong Fuling realized that this handsome man in front of her was actually quite pleasing to the eye. At the very least, this person's words were definitely more reliable and nice-sounding than his younger sister Arbor's. Arbor glanced at his eldest brother before sweeping a glance at Sikong Fuling, who was standing stiffly on the side. Sikong Fuling immediately stammered, stoic face, I entered your dream to save you. Arbor retracted his gaze and clenched his small fists. Clear the way with the flute and lead us out. Sikong Fuling understood his meaning from observing his movements. You have such high control over your dream. Why can't you get out? Arbor expressionlessly looked at her and said, Of course I can get out. But since you're here, let me see your skills. Sikong Fuling secretly rolled her eyes fiercely. Don't think that I can believe you just because you're expressionless and speak as if it's true. Your prideful nature already allows you to see everything clearly. It's really strange. This little stoic is such a formidable figure, yet she was actually trapped in a dream and couldn't get out? The thick miasma before her eyes wasn't the most realistic dream at the bottom of her heart. Then what kind of dream did the little stoic experience this time? What exactly was the secret hidden in the depths of her heart? Sikong Fuling suddenly sensed a severe gaze land on her. When she looked up and met Prince Mo's glinting phoenix eyes, her heart involuntarily shivered. You'd best stay out of things that you don't need to care about. Sikong Fuling pursed her lips. Isn't this just because I'm curious? Mo Lien scoffed coldly, but she was very disapproving in her heart. Would Sikong Fuling be curious? Of course she wouldn't. She had the nightmare magic flute and had probably entered many people's dreams in the past. How could she be curious about Jojo's dream? It must have been the Hierophant who had instigated her to go into Jojo's dream and find out what it was so that he could take advantage of it. Mo Lien felt that she must have found out the truth. She became even more wary of Ding Yun. It was extremely abnormal for this fellow to appear here. He must have a close relationship with the disgusting Wangchuan dragon clan. At the center of the mystical guiding glyph formation, there were ripples of water-like vibrations. Little Tai Sui, Dao Wuji, and the others who were sitting in a circle around the rune formation all opened their eyes slightly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal stood outside the talisman array. His guarded expression relaxed a little as he slowly turned to look into the talisman array. Mo Lien, Mu Xingchen, and Sikong Fuling opened their eyes one after another. In the end, Arbor suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up from the ground. He raised his hand and tugged at his husband's sleeve. Let's go. Mo Lien also immediately stood up. She pulled Arbor's small hand and said to the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others, Let's return to Cloud Court first. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal followed them without a second word, leaving the Ding siblings behind. Sikong Fuling furtively looked up at Ding Yun and stammered, Brother, we didn't find anything. Chapter 4397. Not only did she return empty-handed, but she also cut an especially sorry figure. Sikong Fuling looked down at her hair that was as messy as a chicken's nest and her clothes that were riddled with holes. She involuntarily wanted to cry but had no tears. Previously, she was almost slapped to death by Black Dragon's claws several times as he played with her like a human-shaped doll. Now that the crisis was averted and she returned to her senses, Sikong Fuling discovered that there was practically not a single piece of undamaged cloth on her body. How could she be in such a miserable state? Sikong Fuling couldn't help but want to scratch her head hysterically. The little stoic was too infuriating to look at. Infuriating. Dingyun didn't say much. He merely consoled her after seeing her sorry figure and sent her back to her room to rest. Meanwhile, he slowly strolled toward Cloud Park while inwardly plotting who he should find to inquire about the little stoic's current situation. Just as he stepped out of the waterside pavilion's perimeter, he saw a beam of divine light shoot up into the sky from a courtyard in the northwest corner and hover in the sky for a long time without dispersing. Fuck, that's the advancement light. Dingyun quickened his steps and rushed toward the small courtyard. He inwardly pondered, could it be that the little stoic advanced? At the same time, the alarmed Dragon Clan members also rushed toward Cloud Park under Long Qian's lead. The experts of the Dragon Clan from all directions rushed towards the Cloud Mansion. Everyone gathered at the entrance of the Cloud Mansion. Who's advancing at the bottom of the River of Forgetfulness? Such a dazzling advancement light. Could it be that someone is advancing to the divine realm here and is about to enter the five spirits cycle of reincarnation? That won't do. Are they trying to kill all of us by drawing the heavenly law's five spirits to the bottom of the sea? The bottom of the River of Forgetfulness can't withstand the bombardment of the heavenly law's chaotic reincarnation of the five spirits. Everyone quiet down, quiet down. Long Qian took a deep breath and blocked the entrance to the courtyard as he shouted at everyone. Long Qian frowned and glanced at his grandson before asking gravely, Long Qian, do you know who's advancing here? Long Shangyun couldn't resist pursing her lips and inwardly thought, if grandmother knew that little evildoer's abilities, she probably wouldn't ask this question. Since the little evildoer's body carried the 10,000-year-old shark pearl, is there still a need to ask this question now that the pearl break out of the seal? Who was advancing here? Aside from the demonic genius who broke the seal on the Jiao pearl, Xiaoqin could not think of a second person. Long Qian's face darkened and she was about to speak. The door was suddenly pulled open from the inside. Mo Lian raised her phoenix eyes slightly, her gaze indifferent. She stood at the door and glanced at the people outside. What's the matter? Long Qian knew that she had already offended her grandson-in-law, so she thought about her tone before asking, who is advancing here? Previously, there was already someone in your team who triggered the heavenly lightning and heavenly fire due to the five spirits' reincarnation. Can you ask that expert to move to the island outside? Before Mo Lian could reply with a sneer, a faint laugh came from outside the crowd. Clan leader Long, aren't you making things difficult for him? Young Master Ding chuckled as he walked to the front of the crowd and glanced at Long Qian, whose face had turned green. How can you interrupt him at such a critical juncture? If something goes wrong, you won't be able to take responsibility. Long Qian's face was filled with anger. Just as she was about to speak, the light of advancement shone once again. In an instant, the entire Dragon Clan's land was illuminated as bright as day. Everyone was surprised. Chapter 4398. Long Qian and everyone else looked up at the source of the light, their hearts feeling uncomfortable as if they were being scratched by a cat. They really wanted to rush in and see who was causing such a commotion. Is there a problem with this advancement light? A Forgotten River Dragon Clan member raised an objection. Am I seeing things? Why do I feel like it's flashed 3 times? Long Shangyun said expressionlessly, you're not seeing things. It's indeed 3 times. In other words, it was very likely that the little stoic had advanced 3 minor realms in a short few minutes. That clansman glanced at Long Shangyun with an odd expression. What's going on? Miss Shangyun's expression looks a little strange. What level is this person advancing? She's not a great spiritual master, right? She should be a low-level spiritual master. It was still that brother who thought he was seeing things. If she's an advanced level spiritual master, it's impossible for her to advance so rapidly. Everyone knew that after entering the 10th level of spiritual masters, their advancement would become increasingly slow. Especially after experiencing the 5-spirit reincarnation cycle, cultivators who had reached the divine realm might not be able to advance 1 minor realm after 3 to 5 years or even 8 to 10 years on their slow cultivation path. Sometimes, advancing 1 major realm can consume a person's entire life. That brother's spittle flew everywhere as Long Shangyun rolled her eyes at him. Shut up. She couldn't take it anymore and interrupted that idiot's incessant rambling. Don't you smell an aura that surpasses spirit power coming from all directions? Surpassing spirit power? What kind of power could it be? Naturally, it was the mighty divine power of a divine realm cultivator. The analytical emperor, who had been analyzing confidently, instantly widened his eyes. It can't be? That's right, it couldn't be. The Forgotten River Dragon clan members all looked at their clan leader, whose expression was turning increasingly ugly. Long Qian took a deep breath and turned to Emolien with clenched fists. She's advancing? No wonder there was such a big commotion. Do you think it's a good thing to indulge her like this? Once she can't control the power of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl, then she, bang! Emolien didn't hold back at all and directly slammed the court door shut in front of this dragon clan leader. A few of the younger generation of the dragon clan who were filled with righteous indignation raised their swords and sabers, wanting to kick the door open and argue with Emolien. However, when he kicked it, it was as if he had kicked a hard iron plate. Taking a closer look, Yun Mansion was surrounded by a defensive barrier. Prince Emo must have left something behind to prevent them from barging in. Long Qian didn't leave with her men. Instead, she stood at the entrance of Yun Mansion, feeling tormented and exhausted. His body and mind were ravaged as he looked at it, and the light of advancement kept coming out of it. When dawn came, everyone's faces were numb, and their eyes were red as they stared in the direction of Yun Garden. They waited for another hour. The Emperor of Analysis from before finally opened his mouth and said weakly, It seems to have stopped advancing. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief as if they had been granted amnesty. 19 times. That night, that pervert, demon, leveled up 19 times in a frenzy. He skipped 3 to 4 major realms in a row, which was a total of 19 minor realms. Everyone from the Forgotten River Dragon clan really wanted to knock on the door and ask the person inside, "Are you still human?" Arbor exhaled deeply and slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Emolien, who was standing at the door and smiling at him. The little stoic's eyes lit up and she hopped off the bed. Chapter 4399. Emolien could not help but laugh. He reached out to catch his wife who was bouncing over and rubbed his chin on her furry head. "Jojo, how do you feel?" Arbor raised her little head and looked at him with sparkling eyes. "Not bad." Her advancement this time was surprisingly smooth. In less than a day, her cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds. Arbor subconsciously raised her hand and touched her lower abdomen. This time, the Divine Ruins realm had strengthened and expanded. When she looked inside herself, she could clearly see the 10,000-year-old shark pearl that was hiding in the Divine Ruins realm and did not dare to see her. This 10,000-year-old shark pearl was very intelligent. It seemed to have realized that when the seal had exploded, it had caused her to be injured and its behavior was very bad. Therefore it was very understanding. In order to make up for its previous mistake, it tried its best to help her advance. She had started from a level 2 God-tier master and reached the peak of a level 5 God-tier master. She had jumped over so many small thresholds that she could not even count them with 2 hands. She could not even count the number of times she had advanced so quickly in the 3 continents. When ordinary people stepped onto the God-tier master steps, 10 or 20 years would be like a day. There were many people who would risk their lives to climb a small step. But she had advanced 3 major realms in one go. It was really indescribable. The Divine Division Record Soul chapter had already broken through to the 10th level. A 10th branch vein had formed in her spirit vein. When the seal on the shark pearl was broken, the trembling of her tendons and her god power had disappeared. Between the 10 branch veins and the main vein, god power was endlessly flowing. It was as if a river had gathered and formed an ocean. Emolien couldn't help smiling when he saw her glowing eyes and glowing with vigor. He liked to see her bright and spirited appearance. Reaching out to pull her into his embrace, Prince Emo raised his hand and gently caressed her cheek. "Jojo, you really scared me before." Arbor looked at him apologetically and patted his chest. "Don't be afraid. Haven't I profited from this disaster and am safe now?" Profited from this disaster. Emolien muttered to herself. She pinched her little chin and said, "This is a blessing in disguise. You really scared me to death." Xiao Mu tilted her small head and nuzzled in his embrace again and again before wrapping her arms around his waist and hugging him tightly. Blatantly flirting. Don't mess around. Prince Emo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out to support her body and lowered his head to bite her lips. "Your husband will resist." The little stoic threw him a small, "come at me" look and even tilted her head, her expression very deadpan and taut. It was too vivid. She was like a little kitten, scratching his heart with her 2 little claws. Emolien grabbed her waist and gritted her teeth. Ah, you asked for it. Don't beg for mercy later if you have the guts. Before he could finish his words, there was a knock on the door. The little stoic suddenly giggled at him and pushed away her pitiful wooden-headed husband. She turned around and ran to open the door while saying, "What are you knocking for?" "I'm here." "Greetings to the crown princess." A hidden guard stood at the door and bowed respectfully. Suddenly he felt two knife-like gazes on him. The hidden guard inexplicably glanced at them and immediately straightened his body like a statue. He stammered, "Greetings to His Highness the Crown Prince." Why is His Highness looking at me with such a murderous gaze? He didn't do anything out of line. "What is it?" the little stoic asked. The hidden guard continued to stutter. "The night pavilion sent news." Chapter 4400. The secret guard peeked at the crown prince's tense face and became even more anxious. "The 10,000 elites that we sent previously met up with the elites from the Tsang province in front of the Wangchuan Snowy Ridge, but what?" Arbor frowned and quickly asked. The secret guard was stuttering and it was tiring to listen to him. The secret guard quickly cupped his hands and said, "They disappeared very quickly. Even the night pavilion couldn't contact them." "Disappeared near the Wangchuan Snowy Ridge? 20,000 people?" Arbor was in disbelief. Yes. The secret guard quickly nodded. "I heard that there is a large deserted island nearby, and no one has set foot there in the past few decades. 20,000 elites from the Tsang province and the Tsang province had mysteriously disappeared from a deserted island near the Snowy Ridge? This wasn't good news. The elites from the two provinces had quietly disappeared from the Wangchuan Snowy Ridge? They weren't ordinary soldiers and they were all above the 12th level of the spiritual realm. How was it possible for them to disappear without any warning? Also, it was impossible for them to gather so many elites in such a short period of time." Arbor knew that the situation was serious, and he quickly turned to look at the crown prince. Prince Imo walked forward and said in a deep voice, "Continue to ask the night pavilion to gather information. We must find out what happened." "Yes." The secret guard quickly cupped his hands and left in a hurry. Arbor turned to look at Imo Lien with a serious expression. "Do you want to go and take a look?" 20,000 people suddenly disappeared and it wasn't a small matter. Imo Lien nodded. "All right. There was something fishy about this. How could 20,000 elites suddenly disappear from a deserted island in front of the snowy mountains? With so many people, even if there was a battle, it wouldn't be a small matter." Arbor walked out of the door and said, "I'll inform everyone to move out." Imo Lien quickly followed him and pulled him to her side. "Long Qian is outside." Arbor sneered. One wouldn't visit a temple without a reason. Could it be that these mermen are here for the ownership of the 10,000-year mermaid pearl? Imo Lien looked down at her and said softly, "You don't have to care about what they say." "Of course." Arbor's expression was cold. Who has the time to care about them? Whether these people lived or died in the future had nothing to do with her. Imo Lien grasped her small hand and lowered his head to look at her. "Are you angry?" "No." Arbor shook his head and pulled him out of the door. He whispered, "Don't worry. These people have nothing to do with me." Imo Lien smiled and gently squeezed her little hand. "If you don't want to see them, I'll ask someone to chase them away." "No need. Why should we care about them? We will depart immediately." Arbor raised his head slightly and gave him a calm expression. "All right." Imo Lien nodded slightly. The two of them held hands and walked out of the room. They summoned the members of the Feng clan and the secret guards and briefly told them about the 20,000 elites that went missing. "Does everyone need time to prepare?" "No," everyone replied in unison. Arbor nodded. She turned around and saw little Tai Sui He-chin and a few others walking out of their rooms. Fairy Ginkgo suddenly flew to Arbor's side and looked at her from head to toe. She smiled and said, "Oh, my little sister Xiao Qiao. You're really fast this time. You're already a 5th grade divine master in such a short time." Chapter 4401. Mu Xingqian felt very tired. Sister advanced too quickly and left him in the dust in a flash. In the future, it would be extremely difficult to catch up with his younger sister's footsteps. His original desire to protect sister was still very strong even now. However, reality always made him feel a faint trace of sorrow. The young crown princess glanced at Fairy Ginkgo expressionlessly. "Is it very fast?" "It's just us." Fairy Ginkgo. Why is this sister suddenly unable to continue the conversation and bafflingly at a loss for words? The atmosphere suddenly froze. Everyone looked at each other in dismay before shifting their gazes to the little stoic's expressionless face. They saw the young crown princess standing in front of them with a calm expression with one hand behind her back. Fairy Ginkgo couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She used her eyes to signal for her sister, the peony fairy, to continue the conversation and break this awkward atmosphere. The peony fairy merely pretended not to see and shifted her gaze to the side. Thankfully, this awkward atmosphere didn't last for more than 3 seconds before Prince Emo inwardly walked up in amusement and grabbed his wife's hand to walk out of the courtyard. Arbor was led a few steps before he suddenly tilted his small head and asked in confusion, "Was the atmosphere a bit awkward just now?" Emolien held back her laughter with difficulty and nodded. "Yes." "What? Because their advancement speed isn't as fast as Jojo's?" Emolien said very honestly. "Jojo advanced 3 major realms in one day. Since ancient times there have been numerous deity realm experts. I'm afraid there are only a few who can surpass you." "Oh." Arbor nodded. Emolien twitched her mouth. "It's not ordinary at all. So that's why." Arbor nodded in realization. "Actually, I could have broken through to deity realm level 6 in one go. But I feel that advancing too quickly isn't a good thing." Arbor turned around and blinked. "It's better to leave some energy when appropriate and plan slowly, don't you think so?" Emolien was having a hard time trying to hold back her laughter, but she had to pretend to be serious. She nodded and praised Jojo for being smart. The little stoic carefully studied his expression. "Could it be that you want to laugh?" "No." Prince Emo, who had a strong desire to live, quickly denied it. He shook his head and said, "When did I smile?" Prince Emo hurriedly changed the topic. "Oh right, Jojo. That 10,000-year mermaid pearl swallowed the black dragon soul body earlier. Are you okay?" Arbor shook his head. "What problem can I have?" She seemed to have completely forgotten how dangerous the situation had been as she continued to brag. "That black dragon's soul has been sealed by the 10,000-year mermaid pearl. No matter how powerful it is, it won't be able to cause trouble for the time being." "All right." She suddenly thought of something and stopped in her tracks. She raised her hand. The faint hum of a sword could be heard in the air. A moment later, the thunderclap sword flew through the air and landed in her hand with a whoosh. Before she fainted, she had left the thunderclap sword on the ground. Emolien had probably picked it up for her. She touched the sword hilt and then put it back into her conscious. The thunderclap sword was a holy weapon, so she naturally didn't need to worry that it would be picked up by someone with ulterior motives. Even if it was picked up, with her powerful divine sense, it was impossible for others to strip off her imprint on the thunderclap sword. Arbor thought for a moment and roughly explained the 10,000-year mermaid pearl's 3 main functions to Emolien, Hishirchen, and the others. Everyone was naturally surprised. Chapter 4402. Emolien suddenly recalled something and said in realization, "When your soul left your body, hundreds of ghosts gathered in Southern City and tried to invade your body. In the end, they were destroyed by the aurora of heaven and earth in your dantian. Now, it seems like it's the effect of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. After the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl broke its seal, it had been protecting its master's body and doing its best to protect its little master. So what kind of deep hatred did the mermaid pearl have with the black dragon when it lost control of itself? Seeing that black dragon, he didn't even care about his beloved little master's body. Mother put the mermaid pearl in my body." Arbor turned to look at Mu Xingqian. Even Big Brother didn't have it. Mu Xingqian couldn't help but laugh. "Big Brother is a man. He can protect himself. Mother must have her own reasons for leaving the mermaid pearl with you." "Of course she has her reasons." Long Qian's cold voice came from the door. "When the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl enters the body, even a dying person can be pulled back from the gates of hell." Long Qian looked at the little stoic in front of her with a complicated expression. "Your mother was hunted down in the Lower Star region. The battle with the Shuntian prefecture was so intense. How could she not be injured?" Arbor looked at the old woman in front of him coldly. He suddenly felt that her wrinkled old face was especially glaring. "What do you mean?" Emolien coldly interrupted Long Qian's chatter. "Shut up." Arbor reached out to pull her sleeve and said calmly, "If you have something to say, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush?" Long Qian's icy gaze swept past Emolien, then Ji Qin before finally settling on Xiao Mu. She stated without the slightest ripple of emotion, "If it weren't for this shark pearl, you would have already died prematurely." "Do I need to say it clearly?" Long Qian took a deep breath and continued, "It was the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl that saved your life. When you were still an infant, it was the 10,000-year mermaid pearl that entered your body and pulled you back from the brink of death. You've come back to life, but your body is so weak. You were just an infant back then. You couldn't control this 10,000-year-old shark pearl at all. That's why your mother had no choice but to seal the 10,000-year mermaid pearl. Arbor's eyes were cold and lonely. He stared at her for a while. Your guess? It's just speculation, but I know your mother. I know all of her thoughts. Long Chen replied calmly. She would do anything for you. As long as it's something that can save you, she would definitely try. How do you think your mother died? Stop talking. Emolian roared in anger. Her face was filled with rage and her eyes were cold. Without another word, she whipped the black flaming spirit whip towards Long Chen. Grandmother. Long Shangyun and Long Hu could not help but exclaim. Long Chen suddenly reached out and grabbed the flaming spirit whip that was coming towards her. The strong aura of a transcendent god rushed towards her. Her palm was burned by the flaming spirit whip. In an instant there was a sizzling sound and her entire palm was burned black. However, she looked at Arbor and Emolian with a mocking expression and said coldly, "Your mother died to save you. If she had kept the mermaid pearl, she wouldn't have died so early." Shut up. Mu Xingchen, He Chen and the others were furious. I'll make up for it tomorrow and adjust the time. See you at 4 p.m. Chapter 4403. Long Chen clasped his palms together while a defensive light suddenly emanated from his body, and it was used to resist the force that was being thrown at him simultaneously. Rays of light danced in the air and landed on the old woman's defensive barrier. It shattered with one hit and it shattered instantly. Long Chen took a few steps back and was sent flying. In the blink of an eye, two green figures passed through the crowd and rushed to Long Chen's side. The two of them moved at lightning speed, grabbing onto Long Chen's arms at the same time, stopping her from flying away. Elder Zhu, Elder Li, the crowd bowed and greeted them. The two elders must have been alerted by the commotion caused by her advancement, right? Even the two elders were alerted. Seriously, the mermaids and mermen whispered among themselves and secretly looked at Arbor. Emolian, He Shurchen and Mu Xingchen quickly turned to look at Arbor's expression. They wondered if Jojo could handle what Long Chen said. On the other hand, Xiao Mu's expression was unexpectedly calm and collected, but her eyes were still coldly staring at Long Chen. Let's go. Long Chen was stunned and so were all the mermaids and mermen. After the Dragon Clan leader said those words, this child actually did not have the slightest reaction? He didn't even have a change in his emotions? Stop right there, Long Chen shouted. Mother. Long Chuyu, who heard the news, ran over as fast as he could while panting. Madame Long had a strange expression on her face, and she looked at Arbor with a strange gaze. Mother. Long Chuyu cupped his hands together and bowed to the two elders beside Long Chen. Elder Zhu, Elder Li, Mother, Long Chuyu said anxiously. What are you trying to do, Mother? The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was left behind by our ancestors. Since it chose little sister, it belongs to her. Now that little sister has given it to her own daughter, there is no way to deny it. Long Chen looked at her son coldly. What do you know? Do you think I'm after the pearl? I'm just telling them the truth. She can't control it. The reason why everything was fine before was because the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was sealed by Chu Yun. But now, how could it be the same as before? Right. A merman immediately called out. For the sake of this merman pearl, many people have been sacrificed. The mermaid pearl chose First Miss but not First Miss's daughter. Now that young Miss is dead, the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl should be returned to our merman race. Let's choose another destined person. Yes. Moreover, the shark pearl has devoured our clan's guardian black dragon. It should be returned. Return it. The mermaids and mermen's eyes lit up. They stared at Arbor like wolves and tigers. They had already tossed the matter of Emolian and the others injuring Long Chen to the back of their minds. In the face of such tempting benefits, most people would probably throw away their brains. Arbor looked at these ugly faces coldly. He opened his mouth slightly, and a white jade bead as bright as the sun and moon flew out of his mouth. It hung silently in front of her. 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. A young merman stared at the white jade bead with desire. Without saying a word, he was the first to rush forward and reach out to touch the shark pearl. Suddenly, a strong light was emitted from the mermaid pearl. Long Chen's eyelids twitched and he quickly said, "Back off." However, it was too late. The young merman screamed as the white light covered him. Chapter 4404. Under the illumination of this white light, his entire person disintegrated into snowflake-like fragments, completely dissolving from head to toe. His body and Tao vanished, and his soul was extinguished. Not even the slightest trace of his existence could be found between heaven and earth. Arbor suddenly laughed uproariously. His laughter was calm, clear, and icy. However, Mo Lien, He Shurchen, and the others didn't feel too good about it. The little stoic coolly glanced at Long Qian, who had an unsightly expression. With a wave of her hand, the pure white mermaid pearl landed in her palm. Do you see it? What's the difference? This is the difference. The little stoic's cold voice, simple and clear, landed in the merfolk's ears. If you still don't understand, I might as well tell you clearly. I am the person you said was destined for the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. You can try again if you don't believe me. Arbor held the mermaid pearl in one hand and walked to the other two merfolk without a second thought. You want to try? Or you want to try? The two of them retreated several steps in horror. You don't even have the courage to try, yet you still want the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl? Arbor pushed that person's chest. Are you kidding me? Look at your cowardly faces. I truly feel embarrassed for Ancestor Xuanji. How could she have such ignorant and scoundrel descendants like you? The little stoic turned on her mocking mode, each and every word extremely cutting. If I were Ancestor Xuanji, I would be alive from anger even after I die. Thankfully, she has already passed away, so I don't need to see your ugly and embarrassing faces. Madame Long forced a smile when she saw the atmosphere so stiff. This child, how can you speak like that? We didn't understand the situation before. Since the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl has chosen you as its destined person, then, Arbor raised his hand to stop Madame Long from continuing. He coldly looked at Long Qian and said, You still want to stop me? Long Qian remained silent. A mermaid suddenly swam out of the crowd and pointed at Arbor as she scolded harshly, What do you have to be proud of? Isn't it all because your mother sacrificed her own life to make you who you are now? What else do you think you have without your mother? Your mother is the eldest daughter of our Wang Chuan Long clan, and she was born in Wang Chuan. Without everything that Wang Chuan gave her, could you have everything that you have now? It's fine if you don't know how to be grateful, but now you're actually speaking rudely to our patriarch. You've forgotten your roots. Behind Arbor stood a row of purple forest guards, and when they heard this, they couldn't help but unsheathe their swords in unison. Arbor looked at her coldly. Who are you? Even though the mermaid was a bit afraid, she still said coldly, You don't deserve to know who I am. If you still have filial piety, you should return the 10,000-years-old mermaid pearl to our merfolk race and tell us the method to tame the mermaid pearl. Mai Chen sneered, What a righteous speech. Arbor stared coldly at the mermaid in front of him. He held the mermaid pearl in his hand, and the pearl suddenly glowed, instantly forming a thin whip of light. It slithered through the air like a snake and hit the mermaid heavily. The mermaid looked up at Arbor in shock and covered her face with one hand. A shocked expression hung on his face. His entire body had already shattered into pieces of willow catkins. With a bang, he shattered and scattered with the wind. Those who stop me die. Chapter 4405. The air instantly froze and it was as if time and space had stopped. Everyone stared in shock at the little stoic standing in front of them. She was enveloped in the light of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl and was emitting a terrifying halo. At this moment, Arbor was exuding a powerful aura from top to bottom. The mermen couldn't help but tremble in fear and be speechless. Several mermen in the front row suddenly felt the ground beneath their feet trembling violently. They looked down and instantly cried out in horror, The seabed is shaking. It wasn't just the seabed that was shaking. The entire Forgotten River's secret realm was shaking. The seawater above them was also surging violently as if it would break through the seal at any moment and pour down. Form the formation. A young merman screamed in panic. All the mermen hurriedly moved and formed a defensive formation in a fluster to block the fierce little demon god in front of them. Arbor stood in front of them with a cold and heartless expression. His eyes were fixed on Long Qian and the others. The mermaid pearl in her hand released waves of intense light, and the frightening sound of the churning seawater reached their ears. The purple forest guards turned to look and were horrified. They saw a water dragon rising from the depths of the sea like an angry dragon roaring in the sky. It surged violently and quietly stood behind the little stoic. The dense water spiritual energy around her, bit by bit, slowly spread out, like soldiers setting up a formation, neatly and densely packed, gathering around her. This scene caused everyone's scalp to tingle and their bodies to stiffen. Long Qian was dazed as she stared blankly at the little girl standing in front of her. A complicated emotion flashed through her eyes. With such ability to control water and such a water spiritual technique, no one could continue to deceive themselves and say that the mermaid pearl couldn't be used by her. This child had completely inherited the mermaid pearl's power. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl had been unsealed not long ago, and its water spiritual energy had yet to fully recover. In the future Long Qian didn't dare to imagine. Go exterminate them. Xiao Mu pointed forward apathetically, and the roaring monstrous waves behind her were like giant dragons ascending to the heavens. They let out a furious roar of the sea as they ferociously attacked the merfolk with a crash. Elder Zhu and Elder Li jumped in fright. They worked together to form a defensive barrier and roared, "Defend!" Only after colliding with that power would they know how strong it was. Even with two immortal reverends working together, they were still unable to control the surging water spirits. The waterspout that blotted out the sky and covered the earth fiercely whipped the barrier in front of the two elders. The force of the impact made the merman behind the elder feel extremely defeated. They had a premonition that if the elders were unable to stop the torrential waves, they would very likely end up like the woman from before, shattering under the impact of the waves and turning into snowflakes before disappearing into nothingness. The little stoic who was slowly walking towards them was like a queen who controlled the power of the deep sea. She was terrifying and dazzling, causing people to feel fearful. Long Qian's old injuries had yet to heal, and now that she had new injuries she was truly unable to join forces with the two elders to resist this destructive force. Long Shangyun was supporting her with one hand over her heart. She slowly raised her head and stared at the little stoic who was getting closer and closer. "I knew it a long time ago." Arbor coldly stared at Long Qian and said in an unusually cold voice, "Didn't you ask me if I knew the true cause of Mother's death?" "I know. The moment I saw the mermaid pearl, I knew." Chapter 4406. Long Qian's heart skipped a beat. There was an indescribable feeling in her heart as she stared coldly at her granddaughter. At this moment, it was as if she was looking at her high-spirited, laughing daughter again. Their figures somehow overlapped with each other. No, they didn't look alike at all. Her daughter, Long Chuyun, might have been arrogant when she was young, but she definitely wasn't as cold and unfeeling as the little stoic in front of her. "Didn't you ask me what else I have without my mother?" "Yes. Without my mother I am nothing. Jojo." Mu Xingqian's heart tightened and he couldn't help but murmur softly. "My life was given to me by my mother. For me, she disregarded her own life and did everything she could to keep me alive." Arbor stared coldly at Long Qian and said in a deep voice, "That is why I have to live well. What? Continue her life and continue her future. Walk my own path and continue my future. Do you know what this is?" Arbor stared coldly and mockingly at Long Qian. Long Qian's heart sank and her eyes narrowed. "This is called mother-daughter kinship. How would you heartless and unscrupulous people understand? How would you understand? Mother didn't give me life to let me wallow in the past, and she definitely didn't want me to be filled with guilt. You don't understand." Arbor sighed deeply. "She only wanted me to live well. There is only hope if you live. There is only a future if you live. Living is so easy to say." Arbor placed his hand over his heart and looked up coldly at Long Qian. "I have a clear conscience. I know what I want to do. I understand. You don't understand." Mo Lien stared at her wife's back with endless tenderness in her eyes. Mu Xingqian's eyes were slightly red, and he pursed his lips tightly as he looked at his sister with relief. Xiao Mu slowly lowered her hand, and the torrential seawater behind her churned up into the sky, engulfing Long Qian and the others like a gigantic curtain of water that blotted out the sky. Seeing that the huge water curtain was about to hit their defensive barrier, they suddenly stopped. The two elders' faces darkened. Their saint powers surged as if they were facing a great enemy, waiting for the power to fall. However, the water curtain shattered bit by bit, disintegrating into wisps of watery mist in front of their eyes, spreading out in all directions and letting out soft sizzling noises. Long Qian's eyes were already opened wide, and she was just waiting for the attack to arrive. However, the scene before her caused her to be unable to react for a time. "Cousin." She felt like he was about to die and he took a deep breath. He secretly loosened his clenched fists and wanted to say a few more words. Arbor's cold and resolute voice rang clearly in their ears. "This is the last time. For the sake of Ancestor Xuanji, I'll let you off. From now on, Arbor has severed all ties with the Forgotten River Dragon clan. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. If there's an invasion just like this. Xiao Mu swatted over with a backhand palm, and a giant stone lion that was 30 feet away instantly disintegrated into fine powder amidst a flash of white light. Long Shi's eyes widened. He looked at Arbor and then turned to look at his grandmother. Long Chuyu was deeply affected and had already fainted. Madame Long quickly called for someone to help support him. She looked at Arbor with a complicated gaze. Long Qian also felt a buzzing sound in her ears as she stared coldly at Arbor's back. Chapter 4407. The words, "We'll sever all ties and have nothing to do with each other," echoed in her ears. Long Qian couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and her complexion withered even more. Grandmother. Grandmother. Long Shangyun supported Long Qian, and Long Qian also hurried forward to help. After saying that, Xiaomu didn't look at the Dragon Clan clansmen anymore. It was as if looking at them a few more times would dirty her eyes. She turned around and walked toward the city gates with an indifferent expression. Everyone else naturally followed her. Mo Lien and He Qin both paused in their footsteps and turned around simultaneously. One of them released a pitch-black fire spirit, while the other threw out a wood spirit. They were so fast that it was hard to predict. The two forces heavily collided with the two elders. The pitiful two immortal venerables elders had already expended a lot of holy power to set up the defensive array. Now that they were attacked by two people at the same time, how could they withstand it? The two elders were instantly sent flying by this attack. Everyone was aghast as they looked at Mo Lien and He Qin in shock and fear. Two of the strongest elders in their clan were actually no match for the two people beside the little stoic. At this moment, a trace of fear involuntarily rose in the hearts of the merfolk. Fortunately, they didn't attack just now, right? If they were to really fight, would even a tenth of them be able to remain here? Long Qian looked over with a grave expression. Before the Dragon Clan leader could speak, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal took out a small fan and waved it. He smiled and turned to leave with the group. Mo Lien merely glanced at them coldly before following without a word. The group of mermaids and mermen all had cold sweat oozing out of their bodies. They glanced at each other, feeling as if they had just walked through the gate of hell. "Jura grandmother, granddaughter will help you back to rest?" Long Shangyun didn't know why she was stammering and couldn't speak clearly. Long Qian glanced at her and nodded silently. Long Qian couldn't help but sigh deeply. She glanced at the clansmen around her and then at her father who was being helped away. She massaged her temples as she felt a headache coming on. The situation in Wangchuan was so serious, but the clansmen and the crown princess of the Divine Prefecture parted on bad terms. Let's not talk about working together in the future. It was clearly the river of forgetfulness that proposed to unite the three continents and cooperate on land and sea. But now it was truly a joke. If the little stoic didn't participate, then perhaps the Zhangzhou and underworld provinces would also withdraw, right? Long Huan couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Not long after Long Huan returned to his own courtyard, he was called to the study room by his father, Long Chuyu. His father's body had always been frail, and he was bedridden all year round. Now, because of the little stoic's matter, he was overly worried, and his complexion had become increasingly unsightly these past 2 days. When Long Huan saw this, he could only offer a few more words of consolation. Long Chuyu asked, "What do you think about the alliance between the sea and the land to break the heavenly fate?" Long Huan was silent for a while before he told Long Chuyu about his thoughts. "Cousin has cut off all ties with our Forgotten Creek Dragon clan, and has already said so. I think," when Long Chuyu thought of what happened just now, he could not help but feel a burst of heartache. He had always known that his mother, Long Qian, was excessively headstrong and self-opinionated. Once she set her mind on something, she would insist on accomplishing it and would not care about anything else. But he really didn't expect things to turn out like this. "Breaking the heavenly fate is the right thing to do," Long Chuyu said in a deep voice. "Why don't you follow the original plan and arrange for Jojo and the others to go to the base on Lisha Island?" Chapter 4408. Long Huan couldn't help but smile wryly. "Do you think they'll be willing? The little stoics group must have returned to the Divine Province by now. No, you should go and talk to her." "Father, aren't you being too optimistic?" Long Huan said helplessly, Cousin has already broken off relations with our Wangchuan clan. Breaking off relations with us is a personal matter. Cooperating is for the greater good of the 3 provinces. Long Qiu looked distressed. Although father hasn't interacted much with your cousin, I can tell that this child is someone who clearly distinguishes between gratitude and grudges. She won't destroy an alliance against the Heavenly Fate Empire for her own selfish desires. Realization dawned on Long Huan. Although his father's health had always been poor, he knew that his father was a man of great wisdom. All right, father, I'll go find them now. Long Huan inwardly decided that no matter how the people around his cousin beat or scolded him, he would endure it all. Long Qiu raised his hand and patted his shoulder. You've been wronged. Long Huan shook his head and forced a smile. Suddenly, a royal guard's report came from outside the courtyard, and Long Huan called him in. What is it? The Crown Princess's group is heading towards the snowy mountain range. What? Long Huan was involuntarily startled. Why would they go? Long Huan turned to say to Long Qiu, Father, I'll bring people to find them now. Ferocious beasts roamed the depths of the snowy mountain range. Although the little Stoics group had many people and many of them had high cultivations, it would probably be troublesome if they were surrounded by a group of ferocious beasts. Long Qiu also nodded quickly. Why are they going there? Oh, that's right, go call Yuner over, Long Qiu added. Long Huan's gaze was a bit complicated, but he still nodded. He turned to walk to the door and called a royal guard over to give him some instructions. That royal guard was taken aback and hastily said, Young Master Ding? He seems to have left with the Crown Princess's group. Long Qiu was startled. What happened? Long Huan couldn't help but frown. Was he captured? Or did he follow them himself? Captured? That wasn't very likely. Moreover, he had secretly observed that the little Stoic didn't give Ding Yun any face, so their relationship definitely wasn't good. The guard scratched his head and said, When I came over, I only took a glance. I didn't see clearly whether young Master Ding was caught or left with them voluntarily. Father, I'll go now. What are you going for? Madame Long walked in. Her warm and gentle smile was gone, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She said mockingly, He followed them of his own accord. You're in such a hurry to chase after him. It's as if you care about your son. I've been back for so long, but I've never seen you treat him differently. So it turns out that you didn't dare to show it because of my presence. You're really good at pretending. Madame Long sneered. Long Qiu was choked by her words and was a little speechless. Mother. Long Qian looked at his parents awkwardly. As a son, it was difficult for him to be sandwiched between his parents. He couldn't help his mother criticize his father, so he just stood there awkwardly. What's wrong with you now? What about me? Tell me what's wrong with me. What, you Long Qiu hid it from me for so many years and secretly gave birth to a son outside, yet I can't tell you. Long Qiu originally wanted to speak, but he was stopped by a violent cough. Father. Long Huan hastily went up and handed him a cup of water. I'm not done yet, wait a moment. Chapter 4409. Long Qiu drank a mouthful of water and calmed his breathing. Only then did he open his mouth to speak. Haven't I already explained this matter to you? I didn't know that Xian. Has Xian, you still call her so affectionately. A trace of disgust flitted across Madame Long's eyes. Back then, if I hadn't acted first and went to reason with that bitch Ding Xian, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Long Qiu, who do you think should sit on Madame Long's seat today? Long Qiu naturally lost face after being scolded by his wife in front of his son. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Unreasonable. Then, he turned and entered the inner hall without another word, unwilling to speak with Madame Long anymore. Madame Long turned to look at the embarrassed Long Huan. Huan, you must be tired from running around these days. Rest well at home and don't go anywhere. Long Huan hurriedly said, But mother. No buts. Madame Long pulled her son away. What does that brat Ding Yun's life or death have to do with you? Just let him stir up trouble with the Divine Province's crown prince. When the time comes, others can't stand him and will naturally chase him back. But? Long Huan was dragged out by Madame Long, and he rubbed his forehead with a headache. Sometimes when a woman is unreasonable, no one can persuade her. Mu Xingqian nudged Emolien's elbow and glanced at the railing. His younger sister was sprawled on the railing alone, gazing at the clear water and blue sky as dusk deepened. It had already been almost an hour. Are we really not going to talk to her? Emolienne glanced sideways at him and shook her head slightly. Let her have some time alone. He understood his Chow Chow too well. No matter how resolute her words were, today she had broken off all ties with the Wangchuan dragon clan and her mother's family. Now that she had come to this point, she would definitely not feel good in her heart. Mu Xingqian sighed. When he looked up, he saw Xikong Fuling and Ding Yun walking over side by side. Young Master Ding, Miss Xikong. Mu Xingqian stood up and gave them a seat. Emolienne looked up at the two of them casually. Why is there only tea and no wine? Young Master Ding sat down with a smile, took a teacup and poured himself a cup of tea. Emolienne looked at him deeply. You must have heard of my mother, Ding Xian? Ding Yun smiled and drank the tea in one gulp. He put down the cup and looked towards Emolienne. I had an ill-fated relationship with Long Chuyu when I was young. That's how I came to be the elegant and carefree young master. Eldest brother. Xikong Fuling could not stand his tone of self-amusement and glanced at him in displeasure. Good, Ding Yun said with a smile. As a son, I naturally can't interfere in my parents' past. Anyway, I'm quite familiar with this area. I didn't lie to you. When I was young, my mother brought me here to stay for a while. At that time, I was still young and didn't know anything. I didn't know why we had to stay in this cold and wet place surrounded by water. I only found out later. Waiting for someone, especially waiting for someone for the rest of one's life, is such a difficult thing. Young Master Ding smiled faintly in self-mockery. Xikong Fuling turned to look at him, her eyes flickering slightly. What's with your expressions? Young Master Ding retracted his gaze and looked at Emolienne, Mu Xingqian and the others. He laughed and said, Don't pity me. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.